Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here at the Sawyer Building and up in Carson City, and everyone who's watching online. I want to welcome everyone to our third meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Ms. Hoffaker, please call the roll.
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblyman Hibbets.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Vice Chair Mosca.
Here.
Speaker Yeager. Chair Orenshaw.
Present. And Ms. Hoffaker, please mark Speaker Yeager present when he arrives. And if he's not able to attend, please mark him as absent excused. Before we begin, I would like to make several housekeeping announcements. Some members are joining us virtually. So for those members who are joining us virtually, please be sure to keep your video on so that we know that we still have a quorum. Please also be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize any background noise. Agenda items on today's agenda may be taken in a different order than listed on the agenda. Two or more agenda items may be combined for consideration. An item may be removed from this agenda, or discussion of an item on this agenda may be delayed at any time. Meeting materials can be accessed on our committee's webpage located on the Nevada Legislature's website. You can also sign up for electronic notifications related to the committee's activities on the Legislature's website. We will have a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting and also at the end of the meeting. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and we try to be very good about enforcing that just to make sure everybody gets the same amount of time. Members of the public may provide testimony in different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. If you want to call in for public comment, please dial the following number, 888-475-4499. When prompted for a meeting ID, please enter the following meeting ID, 817-4633-4927, then press the pound button on your phone. Again, that number for public comment, if you want to call in, make public comment at the beginning or end of the meeting, is 888-475-4499. You enter the following meeting ID, 817-4633-4927, then you press the pound key. If you'd like to provide written comments in lieu of testifying today via in person or via phone, please submit them electronically by email to the following email address, LOE-Interim, and the L, the O, the E, and the I are in all caps, and the rest of it is lower caps. So LOE-Interim@lcb.state.nv.us. And that is on our agenda, which is posted on the legislative website and here at Sawyer Building and in Carson City. Or you can mail them the old-fashioned way to the LCB Research Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701. An additional way to provide written comments, you can fax them to the LCB here up in Carson City at 775-684-6400, 775-684-6400 if you wish to fax written comments for public comment. Finally, I'd like to remind members, please silence your electronic devices, especially cell phones and laptops during the meeting. With that, we will move on to our first session of public comment. If there's anyone who wishes to make public comment, either here at the Sawyer Building or up in Carson City, please come forward. I don't see anybody here at the Sawyer Building. Senator Daly, is there anyone in Carson City? Looks like they want to make public comment.
There doesn't appear to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Daly. At broadcasting, is there anyone on the phone lines who wishes to make public comment?
Thank you, Chair. If you are calling in today and would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to join the queue.
Good morning. This is Oscar Williams, OSCAR-WILLIAMS. How is everybody today? Thank you for being here. Do you know that more civilians use the military ballot system than active service members, particularly the NVEs.gov portal? There are, of course, disabled and Native American Indians have access to the NVEs.gov portal as well. I can't find any published statistics on disabled voters using the system or on the Native American use of the nvs.gov system. That's kind of a concern. And there's also no published statistics on the number of hidden voters. Of course, there's no, anybody can opt out of having their address or telephone number listed in the voter data, but there's no qualification. You don't need a reason. Anybody can do it. We've seen a 23% increase of hidden voters from 2022 general to April of 2024. That's a significant increase. It's showing a trend. And again, that's a concern when there's no data on disabled and Native Americans, the ease of using the system, but you don't need to prove a disability. You don't need to prove your level of purity of your Native American blood to access the digital ballot through nvs.gov. So I'm a bit concerned about the trajectory here and the lack of security and checks and balances of civilians using the military ballot system. That's basically what my concerns are at this point. I see this really a threat to our election infrastructure, and I hope that people can address that in this hearing today. Thank you for your time.
Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the phone lines who wishes to make public comment?
Yes, Chair. If you are having a phone number ending in 698, you may begin when ready.
Good morning. My name is Ellen Gifford, and apparently, in spite of the urging of concerned Nevada citizens, and in spite of the fact that it is their responsibility to do so, the Secretary of State's office has no intention of providing the public with information about SB 406 prior to the primary election. The language of this law can be utilized by any individual to serve their own purpose. Without the requirement for concurring witnesses or some means of corroboration, malicious accusations can have free rein, putting innocent voters at risk. The possibility that they could face a Class E felony in the event a clerk or registrar misinterprets their conduct in any way is something the public should obviously be made aware of. One has to wonder what exactly the motivation was on the part of the legislators and the Secretary of State to introduce and approve this law. It is documented that 14 Nevada counties and Carson City have had no known incidents such as are described in this bill. Additionally, documentation from the remaining 2 counties doesn't appear to substantiate the need for a law that puts Nevada's voters at risk of a felony. The Secretary of State's failure to provide education about this bill to the voters is a disservice to all Nevadans and very questionable. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And again, if there's anyone listening who wishes to make public comment, we will have an additional public comment period at the end of the meeting. And I will announce those phone numbers again before the last public comment period. So with that, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes for the meeting, our prior meeting on April 19th. Draft copy of the minutes should have been emailed out to all members. If there are any, and you do have a hard copy here in your packets at your desks here at Sawyer Building and up in Carson City. If there are any concerns regarding the minutes or any members feel there are any errors, please don't hesitate to speak up and we could try to get those corrected. If not, I would accept a motion to accept the minutes from April 19th, our meeting.
Motion?
I have a motion from Vice Chair Mosca. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Assemblyman Hibbets. Any discussion on the motion? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone in opposition? Ms. Hoffaker, please note that that approval of the minutes passed unanimously. I will now move on to agenda item number 4. We're very lucky today to have Ross Armstrong, the Executive Director of the Nevada Commission on Ethics, here with us at the Sawyer Building. Good morning, Executive Director Armstrong. Thank you for joining us and for discussing a little bit about the work the Nevada Commission on Ethics is doing, update on recent activities. Thank you very much for being here. And there is a handout, members, I believe a printout, and I think also online if you want to look at it on your computer.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ross Armstrong. I'm the Executive Director for the Nevada Commission on Ethics. Thank you for giving me the time to present today. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we have an ethics law in Nevada, what our commission structure is, some of the requirements under the law, and I'll provide you an update on our caseloads and our process, and then finish up with some hot topics. I'm happy, of course, to take questions. So the first question is always, why do we have an ethics law? And the answer is Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. So after the Watergate scandal, states across the country enacted ethics laws, including Nevada. Ours first one was in 1975. So we're getting ready to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the ethics law, but we did go 100 years before that law was in place without an ethics law in the state. And the federal law was enacted a couple years later. There are still, I want to say it's under 5 states that don't have an ethics law or statewide ethics commission. In many jurisdictions, local governments have their own ethics commission. So like the city of Honolulu has their own ethics commission. Same thing with New York City and Oakland are just some examples of city-level ethics commissions. We don't have any ethics commissions operating locally, but many localities have their own ethics policies and ways to enforce those as well. In the legislative declaration at the very beginning of the ethics law, it states a public office is a public trust and shall be held for the sole benefit of the people. For the sole benefit of the people, not for the sole benefit of the people in government or friends of people in government, but for the sole benefit of the people. So when I go out and I'm training our public officials throughout the state, I give them lots of details and all the technicalities of the ethics law, but I say, if you just remember that you're supposed to use your public office for the sole benefit of the people, you'll do well in complying with the ethics law. The Commission's mission is to enhance the public's faith and confidence in government, and we primarily do that by enforcing and having public officers and employees avoid conflicts between their private interests and their public duties. We get members of the public and others who come to us and want us to enforce open meeting law or public records stuff that's outside of our jurisdiction. We're really focused on that separation between public and private duties. We get a number of complaints every year, people just kind of frustrated with their government, and there may be things that public officials are doing that don't seem right, but if they're not in the ethics law, that's not going to be within our jurisdiction. The ethics rules are in our NRS 281A. Those are all the rules. We have a regulatory code that's really a procedure manual for the commission and how it processes different cases. So you don't look, if you want to know if something is or not against the ethics law, you look at the NRS. The regulations are really just that procedure manual. And we have some proposed amendments coming up, hopefully soon, to a legislative commission on that topic. So our structure, the Ethics Commission is made up of 8 commissioners. 4 are appointed by the legislature and 4 are appointed by the governor. There are some other rules, like we can't ever have more than 4 from the same political party. There's never more than 4 from the same county. And then there's minimum numbers of attorneys and former public officials. Because we're looking at government action, it's helpful to have people on the commission that have experience with government action. So you can see the 4 commissioners who are legislative appointments are Chair Wallen, Commissioner Langton, who's the most recently appointed commissioner, Commissioner Lowry, and Commissioner Yen. Commissioner Yen's term expires in December, so that will be the next legislative appointment slot. She is termed out. And then the staff, we now have 7 positions. After last session, the legislature approved the addition of our outreach and education officer, which we have recently filled. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we have an executive director, a commission counsel, an investigator, a senior legal researcher, who's like really a paralegal type role, and then an executive assistant. Currently our associate counsel, who in my mind acts most like our ethics prosecutor, that's currently vacant because that person was promoted appointed to our council. So, but we're getting close to filling that particular role. So we're small. We have about 150,000 public employees that are under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission, and there's 7 of us doing that work. So what exactly do? We have 3 main purposes: education and outreach. So settings like this, where we're talking about the ethics law, we go to different local, city or county governments, state governments ask us to come in and do training and various outreach. We also provide ethics advisory opinions. This is something that a handful of folks, I think a lot of folks may not know about, but if you're a public officer or employee in the state of Nevada and you have a question about how your role relates to the ethics law, you can ask for an advisory opinion, and there's a formal process to receive that advice. And then the one that's probably the most public and well-known is that people will file complaints against public officials when they believe they've violated the ethics law, and we process those complaints. So who's covered under our jurisdiction? In the executive branch, the state level executive branch, we have full jurisdiction. So some examples might be the members of the Personnel Commission, staff at the Department of Transportation, or like the board members of the Board of Cosmetology. Those are just some examples. For the legislative branch, we have limited jurisdiction. There's a Supreme Court case that said we don't have jurisdiction over core legislative duties. And then there are some provisions in the ethics law where there are special rules for legislators. We have full jurisdiction over local governments, so like the Reno City Council, a general improvement district, or school district are all examples of local government entities where either the officers, the elected or appointed officers for that agency, or their employees also fall under our jurisdiction. And then we have no jurisdiction over the judicial branch. They have their Commission on Judicial Discipline for that. We'll talk about one definition in our law before briefly going over at a high level what the ethics law requires, and that's commitment in a private capacity. I feel like most public officials and employees know you can't be using your public position to financially gain for yourself. Where people sometimes maybe not have it on their radar is under the ethics law, there's certain relationships that automatically create a conflict of interest, and if you use your government position to benefit those individuals as well, that can be an ethics violation. So those 6 types of relationships are your spouse or your domestic partner, a member of your household, someone within the 3rd degree of consanguinity or affinity, which is just a fancy legal way of saying within a certain, their close relative, right? So you're at the 0 degree of consanguinity, your parent and your child's at the 1st degree, and it kind of spiders out from there. The ethics law doesn't care if you like your family, but if they're within the 3rd degree of consanguinity, it counts as a commitment in private capacity. Your employer, so your private employer, you have a commitment in private capacity to. If you have other substantial and continuing business relationships. And then the law also has a category called substantially similar. So if it's substantially similar to those other relationships, it will also count. Which usually people get angry at me during training because they want me to come tell them the rules. And I'm like, well, there's this one where if it looks like the other ones, it also counts. I'll give you some examples. The Commission has previously held that service on a nonprofit board is substantially similar to a business relationship, even though you're not engaging funds, you're usually giving that nonprofit all of your funds, but you have a fiduciary duty to that nonprofit, and so that creates a similar relationship. A volunteer firefighter had a substantially similar relationship to his employer, even though it wasn't a traditional employee-employer relationship. And in some cases, we found close and long-standing friendships can be substantially similar to a family member. So those are some examples of that substantially similar category. There are 3 main, I call them buckets, there are 3 main topics within the ethics law: improper benefits, disclosure, abstention, and cooling off. So I'll give you some examples of each of those. So the improper benefits part of the ethics law essentially says you cannot use the power of your position to create a benefit if that benefit is for you, for someone on your magical list of relationships, or because you've received a gift or a loan. So some examples are you can't be in a government position and then negotiate both sides of a contract with your private interests, right? Like if your agency is going to buy pens and you run a pen company on the side, you can't negotiate the contract for the pens with your private company. One that we see folks sometimes stumbling over, I think the most, is the use of government equipment or time or facility to benefit personal interests. And sometimes we see that in political campaigns or private business. And so that is one of the specific requirements under the law, prohibitions under the law. You can't give preferences to close family members. So let's say you're at an agency that provides services and there's a wait list, right? You can't use your public power to move them on up the list. And then you can't direct subordinates to benefit yourself or others, right? The staff of the county, the city, the state are for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the person running that agency. And so you can't be using staff to go out and do your personal things for you. Nevada's gift prohibition is also in that bucket, right? You can't receive a gift that would make a reasonable person deviate from the impartial discharge of their duties. The next set of the ethics law is disclosure and abstention, which is about transparency. It's not inherently bad to have a commitment in private capacity. Just because people choose public service doesn't mean they have to shut off all private relationships. But when those private relationships come into collision with the public duties, there's a requirement to disclose those relationships and be transparent about it. And in some cases, our public officers have to sit out decision-making if it's going to directly affect them. So some examples: you can't take government action without being transparent about your conflict of interest. If you vote on funding for your private employer using your public position, that would be a violation of the disclosure abstention rules. And then I think most people are familiar with disclosure in terms of like a city council or some government committee and there's votes. But if you're a employee, you're not an officer, and you are working, you also have requirements to disclose. So the example I like to give in training is if you're a health inspector and you get your list of assignments for the week and your daughter's restaurant is on that list, you need to disclose that conflict of interest before going out. And doing that inspection, your boss will probably assign it to a different inspector. The last category under the ethics law is Nevada has a cooling off law. And it basically says for 1 year after you leave public service, there are certain people you can't work for, and there are certain things you can't do no matter who you work for. So you can't, if you're a state level regulatory agency, you can't go work for the regulated industry for that 1 year. If you are just any agency, you can't go work for a vendor of the agency you just left. There's some requirements in the law. It has to be a contract above $25,000, and your position had to have some ability to impact the awarding of that contract. But you know, if folks are leaving public service and going to go work for a vendor of the agency they're leaving, they want to be super careful about that. And then the other one is no matter who you go work for, you can't get paid by a private entity to work on something that you worked on when you were there at the agency that was under consideration of the agency. So say you're in the financial department, you're developing an RFP, you retire, and you go work for somebody who's applying for that RFP and they pay you to help apply to the RFP you created, that would be a violation of the cooling off law. So those are our 3 categories under the ethics law. I want to give you an update on our education and outreach efforts. This was a big part of our budget ask last session. We asked for the position that you granted us. We talked about our modernization plan, which included leveraging social media, creating topic-specific videos on YouTube, implementing online learning management system, and then I said that position. And so we continue to leverage social media with increased growth. I'd say LinkedIn for us is actually very interesting. We have most followers on LinkedIn, and we can look at those followers and it shows that those are primarily, we know that the vast majority are in the Reno and Las Vegas area, and that most of them are in leadership roles within government or other policy making things. So we know we're hitting the right target with the educational content we publish on there. We now currently have 20 topic specific videos on YouTube. Before that we had 1 video and it was like almost an hour long, and so if you had a specific question you had to kind of dig through that video. Now you can be like, hey, I have a question about cooling off, here's a quick 10-minute video on cooling off. And then our online learning management system, which we call Nevada Ethics Online, we've had some slow growth, but it has helped us especially in terms of if, as the result of an ethics complaint, somebody's required to do training, we can now actually verify that they've done the training in a real way. And then we hired the position in spring, and there's already immediate improvements to our ability to do education and outreach. So that's exciting. Who do we train? Who do we provide outreach to? The next slide shows the breakdown of county, city, state, and then other. I want to say the other, it's a big chunk, so I want to explain what that is. When other is your biggest category, it's always good to dig down a little bit. But during the fiscal year 2023, we trained at the Southern Nevada Housing Authority, all about, I think, 200 of their employees, so that was a big chunk of that other. And then we also trained at the Nevada Civil Attorneys Conference, which again is another 180, 200 attorneys that represent all different types of government levels, so it's hard to put them in one space. About 1,400 people trained, which was a big increase over the year before. But one of our issues is that still represents only 1% of the people who are covered under the ethics law. So we're constantly looking at how can we increase that total number of people trained. So that's education outreach. I'll describe our advisory opinion process really quick. A public official will submit a request to us. We have a process where our commission council will get more facts from them and then come up with a good set of facts, draft a draft opinion, send it to the commission. The commission votes to approve or modify that opinion, and then it's issued to the public officer or employee. It's a confidential opinion, so they have the ability to waive confidentiality and have us just publish it, but in most cases they prefer to keep it private. You can see our advisory opinion caseload. We had 41 requests. The big story here is you can see where there was a collapse during COVID, right? Because that fiscal year 2021 is the second half of 2020 and the first half of 2021. And you can see we're back up to where we were. What is the story that's not really told on this graph is the 5-year average before fiscal year 19, the average was 15 a year. And so there was this spike in activity in fiscal year 2019. I wasn't around, so I can't say what caused that in both complaints and advisory opinions. I think we probably did a better job of telling people we were around. And so we're now at a much higher volume and back at that level. And then you can see the number issued. The difference between requested and issued, sometimes we get people who request opinions and they may not be a public officer or employee, so we can't provide them an opinion. Sometimes people will ask for an advisory opinion about their coworker they don't like down the hallway, and we have to say, no, it has to be about your behavior. And then there's a little bit of gap when somebody requests during one fiscal year and it actually gets issued the next one. What do people ask us about the most? They mostly ask us cooling off questions, and they mostly ask us about disclosure and abstention. Those make up about 60% of the advisory opinion requests from the last fiscal year. And you can see that a big chunk of the folks asking for advisory opinions are state level employees. And so clearly there's an opportunity for us to do a better job of providing outreach to city and county employees about the possibility of asking for an advisory opinion. Our complaint process, people ask about the complaint process quite a bit. We receive a complaint. Also in the ethics law, we can initiate a complaint on our own motion. So if we receive information, it can't be anonymous information, but if we receive information, and honestly, it's usually a news story that piques our interest, we go, oh, that doesn't look right. Let's look into that some more. We can start our own complaint. The first step is for the commission to determine if they have jurisdiction, and they have 45 days to do that. Then if we do, we investigate, and it goes to a 3-person panel. If you're familiar with the criminal justice system, I say like the panel is sort of like a preliminary hearing, or it's like a grand jury sort of thing. They're just determining if there's enough evidence to go forward. Sometimes we get done with an investigation and there's no there, and so my recommendation to the panel is just to dismiss the case. This case should not go forward. That we only got some information during the complaint process, and now we have more. Then the remaining commissioners, the remaining 5 commissioners, if it goes to a hearing, like a little mini ethics trial, those 3 commissioners who served on the panel cannot serve on the final hearing. And a lot of times, just like in most legal matters, we get to a stipulated agreement with individuals. So actual contested hearings are pretty rare. Complaints are confidential. So we will not confirm or deny that a complaint has been received unless we get to the point where there's a review panel determination, and then once the review panel determination is issued, then the case becomes public. The investigatory file remains confidential, but at that point the panel determination and the complaint become public. You can see our ethics complaints received. I checked so far for this fiscal year with about 2 months left. We're already at 103, so we'll see an increase in the number of complaints received. Where are the complaints coming from? The big chunk in last fiscal year was from the counties. They have a lot of public employees compared to the, some of like the state and some of those others. So that makes sense. This next visual I really like because it shows kind of the life of what those complaint cases look like. And so if you say, okay, in fiscal year 23, we received 102, we only accepted jurisdiction on about 1/3 of those. the others didn't have sufficient information or they weren't appropriately before us. And then you can see kind of that breakdown of what happens to those cases, whether it ends in a stipulated violation or a deferral agreement, which is sort of like ethics probation, I guess would be the best way to explain it. We also have letters of caution and instruction, which are when we find that, yeah, there's some issues here, but we don't need to do a full-blown case for this, a letter warning them that, hey, watch out for this conduct in the future is sufficient. So that provides that particular visualization. And then the last thing, part of the ethics law is that we can issue civil penalties. If it's a willful violation, there can be flat fines. If somebody financially benefits from their unethical conduct, we can fine them the amount that they benefited and multiply it times 2. So you can see there the history of our civil penalties collected. The big jump in fiscal year 20 and 21 was the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority Southwest gift card issue. Those were our largest fines that the Ethics Commission ever issued, because they had received tens of thousands of dollars in Southwest gift cards for themselves. Shifting a little bit to some legislative history, since we are here before the Legislative Commission, as I said, or Legislative Committee. As I said, in 1975 is when the legislature established the Ethics Commission. Then there were some issues right away, and originally there were 2 separate commissions, one for the legislature, one for the executive branch. They didn't do much for the first 10 years, and so in 1985 they amended it to have one commission that had jurisdiction over both. And then in 2009, there was a Supreme Court decision about core legislative functions, and that the Executive Commission could not take action on those particular matters. And then in 2015, there was further jurisdiction that narrowed the Commission's jurisdiction over legislators. Some recent legislative history, there have not been major changes to the ethics law in a while. In 2019, there were comprehensive changes proposed. And I would say, in all of these cases, in 2019, 2021, 2023, not huge substantive, like transformative changes, but a lot of little changes to the law along the way. So in 2019, it was amended twice. It died in the Assembly. In 2021, it was amended to carve out the legislature completely from the Ethics Commission jurisdiction. It passed the legislature and then was vetoed by Governor Sisolak. And in that veto message, he pointed to the failures of the previous split commission system, and he said, let's take a look at the costs, like maybe we should adjust something, but we need a closer look at the costs. And then last session, again, comprehensive changes proposed, and then there was the same legislative carve-out amendment, and it died in the Senate. We did try to work through that process on maybe a compromise solution where a complaint would come in, the commission would investigate it, and at the end of the investigation, hand it off to the legislature to actually do the determination and any sort of sanctions. But I think we were just too late in the session by the time that came along to occur. So finally, some current ethics hot topics. It's campaign season, which is always interesting. We don't have jurisdiction over campaigns. We do have jurisdiction over public officers and employees if they are running for office or they're trying to support a campaign or ballot initiative. So that's when they can come to our attention. Last campaign season, we had strong enforcement of people who were using their uniforms to support their campaigns or other campaigns. I think we had almost 10 or a dozen cases on that topic, and that strong enforcement so far, we're a little bit early, but so far we have not seen repeats of that conduct in using government equipment to benefit campaigns. Also this year, early on, we did a campaign and candidates webinar, which was great. We had about 25 to 30 candidates or campaign staff attend that to get a good sense of what should I watch out for if I'm a public officer or employee and involved in a campaign. The legislative ethics has been a hot topic since the last legislative session. I think in particular, the one that has received the most attention is the funding through the Christmas tree bill, where about $6.9 million of that bill went to organizations who had ties to legislators, and there was no disclosure around that issue. And so that has been a particular issue that we've seen people have asked us, and we say we have no jurisdiction over that core legislative action of developing and passing a bill. So that has been a topic. And then the next one that I feel like we're on the early stages of having not a trend of violations, but a need for us to have some clarity from our commission in terms of what the rules are gifts and big events. As specifically Las Vegas has more and more big events with big expensive ticket items like the Super Bowl or F1, or I think the NCAA tournament is coming up. What are those lines and boundaries on public officers or employees being able to receive like tickets to those events or other special access? So that's something that when you look at the Ethics Commission's case history on gifts, that's not super clear, and we've never had gifts that would be in these values of these big ticket items that we're seeing. And so I imagine we'll see some action on that as we have more and more of these big particular items. And so that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was a lot. Nothing says Friday morning like ethics. So, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Armstrong. Thanks for the thorough presentation. I know I have a few questions, but I'd like to go to members first. I'll start up in Carson City. Senator Daley, any questions for Executive Director Armstrong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, like comments and various things, and I reviewing the legislative history and then that storied back and forth, I think sometimes may give the wrong impressions on mine. So I guess I'll just ask some basic questions. You're familiar with the separation of powers that's in the Constitution?
Correct. Yeah, that was the basis for the decision, which said core legislative values could not be looked at by the commission.
But you understand that that's a principle in the Constitution, that you have the executive branch and they have their constitutional duties and authorities, right? And you have the legislative branch and they have their constitutional duties and authorities, and you have the judicial branch. And I know that the Ethics Commission is an executive branch agency which was created by the legislature, given the duties that it's supposed to have, funded through the budget process, and that's the legislative steps that have to be taken under the separation of powers. And then the executive branch carries that out. The Constitution also says is that one branch can't exact authority or tread into the areas of the other branches. You're familiar with that as well?
Correct.
Right. And I bring this up just to try to give clarity to anybody that may be listening, is that there's a reason you don't have jurisdiction over the judiciary branch, and they have their own set of rules for ethics and rules and conduct of judges, as does the legislature. And that's where we're trying to see those separation of powers and various things. The legislature has authority over the legislature on whether or not people are seated. It's clearly in the Constitution that way. And then we have a whole set of rules and various things that apply to legislators. And I just want to be clear that when people come to you and say, hey, we're going to complain about a core legislative function, there's a different set of standards that legislators have to apply, and we all get training on it when you're making that decision on whether or not you have to disclose or whether or not you can vote on a particular issue. And everybody's agreed that there were no violations over that, but I still see some of this, there's this big issue. I says, it's not a big issue. Those legislators acted appropriately under the rules and guidance that apply to the legislative branch. And I think it confuses people when you give presentations that indicates there's some issue that's unresolved, and that's not the case. Go ahead and comment if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Daley, for the question. I think the issue that we have now is that there are individuals, when you look at let's say specifically that Christmas tree bill, right, because that's the one that's been in the press the most. if they were any other public officer or employee in the state, that conduct fell below our standard for those other folks. And so when I go and train, there's some frustration, right, that as a different set of rules for the legislature. The nature of legislating is very different than the nature of being an executive branch agency out there. In fact, even in the ethics law rules for, let's say, local city councils or county commissions, when they're in the early stages of doing their local legislative function, those disclosure abstention requirements don't apply. And so I think, the two amendments that those bills did not become law established specific legislative ethics committees who would then be able to appropriately take action. I think right now, for the public, there's no transparency about what occurs when you have an issue where someone has maybe not disclosed when they should have, when they had a conflict of interest.
And I understand, and I think I remember the bill that would have separated it out. And the legislature does oversee our own members in both houses. Each house has control over their side. And those things are all done. We all receive the training. And I think that's why I started out with the separation of powers when we were first talking, is the executive branch. Your agency is an executive branch agency, is that correct?
That's correct.
And under the Constitution, the executive branch cannot have that type of authority over the legislative branch, and vice versa, and same thing with the judicial. So there is transparency, and I'm sure you're familiar with the rules that we all have to read and understand. And I'll paraphrase, it says, we recognize that we have a citizen legislature. We don't have a full-time legislature, and that every single member of the legislature has another job. They have other commitments to various things. That's the nature of a citizen legislature. And when we look at the various issues to which we're confronted, right, we apply those things. We have to make that analysis. Is it going to affect me in my private capacity and all of those things any differently than another person in a similar situation with the similar facts in front of them? That's the standard that we have to do for abstention and disclosure as a citizen legislature. Otherwise, I don't think you could have teachers in the legislature. You couldn't have lawyers. You couldn't have people like me that came from labor. And it would just significantly reduce the number of people that would be able to run for and serve in the positions in the legislature. And that's not what the people want. That's not the way we're set up. That's not what the law is. And I'm just trying to eliminate some of this confusion over what the standard might be for a person in the executive branch that falls under your jurisdiction. And there are reasons for the difference. The same thing with the judiciary. There are reasons for that, and most of it is the separation of powers and the core basics of the functions of the three branches of the government. Is that a fair statement? Clearly supported in the law and the Constitution.
This is Executive Director Armstrong. I think that that's a fair statement. I don't think, even in the ethics law, as we look at disclosure and abstention issues with relation to executive branch agencies or local governments, I think our city councils and county commissions are just as every bit their citizen councils and commissions too, right? They're typically, they have some private employment and interest, different than the legislature. But even in our executive branch, as we look at it, disclosure, as long as you've made that disclosure and been transparent, there's a presumption that you can participate and don't have to sit out with voting, because the ethics law recognizes you can't have an abstention rule so strict that everybody has to sit out all of the time and not participate. And so I think for our enforcement in the executive branch, I think it's important to note in that disclosure and abstention analysis, even though for me they're in the same bucket, there's a preference for the transparency of disclosure. And once that disclosure is made, then you do that analysis, like you said, Senator Daley, about Am I impacted any different than anybody else? No. If this applies to everybody the same way, then I can go ahead and participate on that matter. That's the rule, which you're well aware of.
And I understand, and I'm still trying to get to that separation, and still you're trying to me, mix the streams or cross the streams, if you will, as I said last session. But anyway, under the rules for the legislature, you make that analysis, and if you're not conflicted, the reason or the need for the disclosure, and it may be different for your local governments and various things, and I would disagree when you look at yes, they have other interests, some of them have other jobs and various things, but being a county commissioner or a city council person, you're on like 7 to 8, sometimes 12 subcommittees. It's full-time work, and they get paid accordingly, although I think they're probably underpaid too, but not as much as the legislature. None of us do this for the money, though. So I think it is executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. Those comparisons are not the same. And I know you've had the bills, and some of them have come forward and failed and various things. And I'm hoping that you guys are not going to have another 80-page omnibus bill that tries to encroach in over to that area. And I'm hoping we can have a separate legislative-only commission similar to what the judiciary has to investigate those complaints, because we do have a little bit different rules and different. We're coming from different perspectives and areas on how the legislature works, independently from the executive branch. And I just want the Ethics Commission to be clear on part of the reasons some of your proposals have not gone very far is, that executive agency encroaching into the legislative arena is going to run afoul of the Constitution, and is obviously going to get some of that pushback. I just wanted to be clear on the record for anybody that may be watching, is that the legislative branch oversees, and we have the rules in place. We follow as much of the procedures and the ideals as possible, but it does apply a little bit differently to what the legislature does. And that hot topic issue that you have on here is really not an ethics issue, and everybody that's examined it has said that there's no violation of any rules or that ethics on those votes. So just wanted to be clear on that. Final question, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead, Senator.
Separate topic completely. And I know you don't cover campaign stuff. We have the Secretary of State's office for that. Although you did have a government employee, which you found violated the ethics rules as an employee engaging in campaign activity, but he was also the employee. What's the status of that? I know there was a fine, and some people just don't want to follow the rules and be held accountable. So what's the status of that particular case with the governor?
Thank you. I wanted to confirm, because we had, I want to say 4 or 5 cases where we found violations last campaign cycle about that. So the case involving the conduct of then Sheriff Lombardo is currently at the Supreme Court, waiting to see if we'll have some sort of settlement conference before they hear arguments on the substance. So there was violations found, a fine issued, and that is currently in that litigation. When we have a complaint that goes all the way through the process, I think it's been asked before, like, what are those appeal rights for people who might have been found to have violated the ethics law? They go through a petition for judicial review. There's a whole system of that set under the Administrative Procedures Act. So that is where that particular case is at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up, Senator Daley?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Armstrong. One question I had, I wanted to go to slide 15 on education and outreach. I think you mentioned some different trainings you'd had with the Southern Nevada Housing Authority employees and Nevada Civil Attorneys Conference, and you mentioned I think totally this year you've trained 1,400 individuals, but that's only about 1% of individuals who might be eligible. And I applaud your efforts to reach out and to train the employees. And I just wonder in the future, what additional outreach do you think can be done to try to reach all those other officers and employees who are covered by the ethics law that maybe can't get to a physical training? I see some of the social media stuff. I just wondered if you could discuss possible future outreach efforts.
Sure. This is Executive Director Armstrong. Well, one of the things was to get a dedicated person to do education and outreach. So that is already tremendous, because previously those duties fell on the Executive Director, and when you have cases with statutory deadlines to meet, those take precedent over being able to do some of that education and outreach. So currently, kind of in our portfolio of the ability to do education and outreach, we do the in-person trainings. That 484 was mostly those in-person trainings. We recently executed a memorandum of understanding with Clark County to have, now that we have these topic-specific YouTube videos, they can take that content, pull it into their county-wide learning management system, and so that their county employees and supervisors can get training through their internal system. And so we're looking at additional MOUs so that folks can get the ethics training where they're already getting employee training. And then we have the Nevada Ethics Online, which is an online learning management system, and people can sign up and register there to go through ethics training. And what we want to do with that platform, right now we just have an ethics basics course and we have one on campaigns, but we have kind of a 4-phase plan to have, like, hey, here's ethics training that is really good for individuals who have jobs related to like purchasing and contracting. What are the specific ethics issues you want to be looking out for? So we're going to have to figure out some better ways to collect the data in terms of all the people that we're actually training, because it's not just somebody sitting there with a PowerPoint in an office. Hopefully that answered your question. Those are our plans to expand that. I think, having the material where people are already getting some training is our most helpful approach.
Thank you. And I just wonder, in terms of outreach to some of these other employees, are any of the local government employers watching these videos mandatory? Or are they incorporating that as something that employees and public officers need to do?
Thank you again, Executive Director Armstrong. Yes, so for example, in Clark County, they recently passed a new ethics ordinance locally, and employees at a certain level, a certain classification, have to take that ethics training annually. We don't have in our statute mandatory ethics training for everyone, and so it's really up to us to say, to sell it and to market, you should do some ethics training. So those are Clark is the one I know has like the most forward-looking intense requirement for their employees.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Armstrong. And one additional question I had, going to, I think I lost the page. I'll try to find it again. Members, any additional questions for Executive Director Armstrong? I know we've got Senator Seavers Ganser, Assemblywoman Dickman online. Please don't be bashful. Raise your hand or speak up.
Yes.
Members.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, Assemblywoman Dickman.
I appreciate that. And I had put my little chat hand up, but it's kind of hard to track everything. I just want to circle back to the conversation we just had about the legislature and ethics commission and some of the topics. So, first we start out with jurisdiction, and there is a separate jurisdiction between the different branches, and I agree with that. But I do disagree with some of the comments that were made. I think that we always need to disclose conflicts, and that we're talking about, when is there a conflict? When do we need to make sure it's transparent if someone works for an organization that will be directly affected? And I know the definition is, will you benefit more than anybody else in that same position? But during the last session, we specifically had some legislation where funds went to nonprofits who directly employed members of the legislative body. And it wasn't like a school district or certain other large organizations. They were small organizations, and the amount of money that was allocated to those organizations substantially affected their finances and those potentially who were employed there. And so I think the legislature needs to revisit when you make disclosures. And that has been a topic since I've been in the legislature, on and off since 2004. And I think transparency is always the way to go. And we did not see transparency. I believe there were conflicts and that there should be more accountability around that. And we need to look at the past, but we also need to look towards the future. So I strongly disagree with some of the comments that were made, because I think when you have organizations that are not governmental organizations, they are nonprofits that specifically get substantial amounts of money who employ legislators, there are conflicts and there should have been disclosures. And I think we need to look at that. Again, what happened in the past and moving forward. You can talk about the legislative body taking care of itself, but I think there is room to have a body that would be arm's length and could better evaluate when issues like this come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sievers-Gatzert. Executive Director Armstrong.
Yes, thank you. This is Executive Director Armstrong. I just wanted to note, so the Commission made the decision a couple of meetings ago that we're not going to be putting forward a big comprehensive bill. We're not going to be putting a bill forward in this next legislative session. But what was very clear, the message to me from our commissioners, is that we are to stand at the ready if the legislature wants to tackle that issue and develop its own. Like, we're not going to tell the legislature how to create their own, if they're going to create an ethics organization, but we're here. We have access. We are part of the North American Ethics Agency Association, so we have access to other jurisdictions, and we'd be happy to work with your staff in looking at what other jurisdictions do. If that's something that this interim committee wants to produce as a bill, or if there's a legislator that wants to take that on, we stand here as a resource, prepared to get you access to any of the information or expertise that is out there as you look at tackling those issues.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Armstrong. And again, I do want to remind everyone that pursuant to the rules of each House and our joint rules, we do have committees on ethics that can handle any issues that do arise. And of course, future legislation we can certainly look at next session, but we do have committees on ethics. Any additional questions? I believe Vice Chair Mosca had that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this detailed information and answering a lot of my questions prior. Just two questions for you. When the civil penalties come in, where does that money go for the public record? And then what's the percentage of the complaints are elected versus staff?
Thank you for the questions. I will have to get back to you on the data split between elected folks and staff. Under the ethics law, we have two categories of people. We have public officers and we have public employees. And public officers are any position that's established in statute. So that's not necessarily just electeds, right? Like county managers, presidents of university, those are public officers, even though they're not elected. I'm a public officer under the law, even though I'm not elected. So I'll have to I can hunt that down, and I'll get you that data. And then the civil penalties, that funding goes into the general fund. So the civil penalties do not go to fund our agency budget. Our agency budget is funded by a blend of general fund and then local county assessments. About 72% of our revenue for our budget comes from counties and cities who meet the qualifications under the statute to pay the assessment, and then the other comes from the general fund. That percentage breakdown is based on a formula in terms of how many actual people there are in each of those jurisdictions. So I said, like, we've got the 150,000-ish so public officers and employees. The 28% that is paid by the state general fund is because 28% of that number comes from state agencies.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mosca. Here at the Sawyer Building, any additional questions? Members online, any additional questions? I don't want to miss anybody, so please don't be bashful if I didn't see your hand go up. Well, thank you very much, Executive Director Armstrong. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate your availability as a resource, and thank you for traveling today down to the Sawyer Building to present. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Have a good rest of your meeting today.
You too. Thank you. We are now going to move on to agenda item number 5. We are very lucky today to have Gabriel Takara, our Chief Deputy Secretary of State, Office of the Secretary of State, Mark Woloshyn, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, William Scott Hohen, Clerk Recorder for Carson City, Catherine Bowling, Clerk Recorder for Eureka County, to present an overview of voting systems in use in Nevada for the 2024 election cycle. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Chair Orenshaw, members of the committee. Thank you all for having us. Before I turn it over to Deputy Volashin for our presentation, I just wanted to mention a couple of items that came up in public comment this morning. First, as this committee may remember, I believe statistics for the use of ease were presented at our March meeting, giving a breakdown of the different qualification for ease members. And just a reminder to the public that the use of ease for tribal members is specifically for members of tribes who live on reservations or colonies. There are no other qualifications in law. And then I did want to add about SB 406, the Secretary's Election Worker Protection Law. We've been very clear publicly and in court, because a lawsuit was brought against us regarding that bill, about the Secretary's goal of protecting election workers. And for the record, that lawsuit was dismissed. So I just wanted to address those items. Thank you very much. Deputy Volashin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate that comment, and thank you for the update.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Mark Volashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Thank you for having us here to present today in regards to the use of voting systems that will be used by our county election officials across the state during the 2024 election cycle. Looking at slide 3, I do want to clarify some of the terms that we're going to discuss today. As we were discussing what to present specifically to meet the committee's needs, we did realize collectively that when you think about voting systems and the voting process, it ends up being far more expansive than most individuals realize. So there is, for example, an in-person voting process that includes a check-in kiosk that you may remember, the voting system itself that you cast a ballot upon, the tabulators that are used to aggregate the data. There's also an entirely separate mail process with drop boxes and a number of other involved items. Today, we are going to focus solely on the in-person voting process and specifically on the voting systems that the electorate will stand in front of for those individuals that choose to vote either during the 2-week early voting period or during the 12 hours of in-person voting on Election Day. If the committee is interested in hearing about any other element, of course, of the electoral process, we stand eager to provide that information, but I did want to clarify that up front. Statutory authority. It's important to note, again, that when we talk about voting systems, this is not something that the secretary, the clerks, the elections division, or any other election official across our state arbitrarily thinks up and pursues in an interim period. This actually goes back to, and there's a number of federal and state requirements relating to these systems. And that starts back with the Help America Vote Act of 2002. Without going into an in-depth study or analysis of what that act did, I do want to just highlight it established the Elections Assistance Commission, which then established voting system guidelines. Those guidelines have been in place since the early 2000s, and we have a statute that specifically requires that all systems used in our state meet or exceed the EAC's standards. The EAC recently, in the last couple of years, created a new 2.0 standard. I also want to highlight that individuals that look into the VVSG process and understand and start to peruse maybe the roughly 330-page document that is the VVSG 2.0 standards, I want to explain and highlight those systems. There are no systems that meet that standard yet. Since the EAC passed it, the vendors across the country are still working to make systems that meet the VVSG 2.0 standards. That being said, all of our systems, again, in use in the state, do meet VVSG 1.0 standards that are still in place and have not been sunset. So starting back in 2017 is really the kind of the most relevant point to talk about when we think about the voting systems that you and the other voters across our state will see, not only in the coming weeks, but also going through November. There was a massive statewide refresh, so to speak, in voting systems and a replacement. A bill was passed that made an appropriation to the counties so that the counties were able to purchase new voting systems. Those systems, of course, again, still had to be ultimately certified by the Secretary of State. There was a very strict process that we abide by that ultimately results in the Secretary approving voting systems. At the time, only 2 companies came forth, Dominion Voting Systems, or DVS, and then Election Solutions and Software, ES&S. Those were the 2 companies that applied. Again, of note, and this question comes up very frequently, they are both American-owned and American-based companies. And then I provided some of the information on the right side of the slide there that you can see relating specifically to that appropriation. Following that bill, again, this is back in 2018, 16 companies chose to go with one of the vendors. This was a county clerk and registrar decision based on their discussions with their county leadership. And one county, Carson City, chose to go with elections solutions and software, excuse me, a typo there on my part, ES&S. Since then, in following the conclusion of the 2020 election cycle, one county did transition from Dominion to ES&S. Again, stressing, it's important for me to stress that all of these are EAC compliant. All of the systems that were and are used very much meet our standards, but there was one change in one county. And then most recently, we did have 4 counties transition from the voter verifiable paper audit trail to a different element, a different kind of component of the voting system, ballot marking device. And we do have the clerk recorder from Eureka, Kathy Bowling, who will be joining us here momentarily to talk through what those systems look like. This, again, is really a little bit of an eye chart, and I apologize for that, but really to highlight that across our 17 counties, again, this is something that we track very closely. A couple things I would like to highlight. The 4 counties who transitioned to the ballot marking devices from the voter verifiable paper audit trail are highlighted in yellow so that you can see which 4 those are. Also, again, when you think about the needs of the electorate, some folks assume that, that, actually, I'm not sure what some folks necessarily assume in regards to the quantities that are used across our state. So we're providing them for you today. There are, as you can see, about 5,000 voting systems used in Clark County, given the population and the needs to make sure that enough polling locations are placed across the county to meet the needs of the electorate. So there are as short lines as possible so that there are no challenges for a voter to get access to the ballot. That same mindset extends across every corner of our state. And I will tell you, we have lengthy discussions with the clerks and registrars about where their polling locations are placed, the changing needs based on community development, new developments that are going up and shifting demographics across the counties. And again, even to highlight with Eureka County, for example, there's about 130-mile distance between one polling location and a county seat. That obviously necessitates machines to be able to put, give voters the opportunities that they have under law to vote as they see fit in a safe and secure manner. Right before I turn it over to Clerk Recorder Bowling, I do want to highlight that there is one error on this slide. Again, that error is mine. Probably a joke I can make here about hand counting and tabulating and human error. I won't. It's too much of a softball. But the numbers on here, there are 15 counties that now use Dominion voting systems. As I mentioned earlier, 2 counties have transitioned to ES&S, Lander and Carson City. So the correct number here is 15 counties use Dominion voting systems. Again, check-in kiosks, to be clear, as I mentioned previously, a number of different solutions and vendors across the state that were reviewed and discussed. That's an important component, but not one we're going to go into today. The VREMS project is, by the way, consolidating that, and there's a lot of merit to that when it comes to same-day voter registration and a number of other security elements that we can talk about another time. The machines that Dominion uses, though, again, it's an ICX, and I'll allow Clerk Recorder Bowling to cover that, but the VVPAT and the BMD piece are the big items that she'll identify here in a moment. And that being said, Clerk Recorder Bowling, I believe you are on the Zoom call, so I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, Clerk Recorder Bowling. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Deputy Secretary Woloshyn, for your presentation.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. For the record, my name is Catherine J. Bowling. I go by Kathy, and I'm the Eureka County Clerk Recorder. I was appointed in May of 2022 prior to the 2022 primary election and elected that November. This current primary election will be my 4th election since taking office. As a clerk recorder here in Eureka, I am responsible for recording documents, clerk of the 7th Judicial District Court, clerk to the county commissioners, and of course, managing elections. There are a lot of components that go into putting on an election, months of preparation, months of work and coordination with different vendors and the Secretary of State's office. But today I'm only speaking, like Mark said, to the in-person voting portion of that process and how we manage that in Eureka County. Just to reiterate what Mark explained, all counties have a voter registration management system where we maintain our registered voters. Each county currently has various vendors that provide that service, but we are in the process of transitioning to a top-down software system that all 17 counties will use. The voter registration system's voter information is linked to a voter check-in kiosk. If Mark goes to the next slide, it's A that you see in the slide.
Yes, I think we're there. Sorry to interrupt you. We are at the next slide. Sorry, Clerk Recorder. Thank you, Deputy Woloshyn.
Thanks. So when the voter registration people come in to vote, they are checked in at that kiosk by an election worker, and that election worker verifies their information and also their signature. And that information is brought over from our election management systems. Then they are issued a voter card that contains only the ballot information for the precinct and the party that they are registered for. There was a misconception in our county by some of our voters that their personal information was loaded on the voter card, and that personal information goes with their vote, but it doesn't. It's an activation code in a kiosk that tells the Dominion machine which ballot style to pull up, and so that they can vote the correct ballot. The voter then takes that card to a Dominion ICX machine, which is B, and it's an electronic ballot marking device. They insert their voter card, and it in turn pulls up that appropriate ballot style that I mentioned so that they can cast their vote. At this point, they can accept their ballot choices, and one of two things will happen. In the counties that have the voter verified paper audit trail machine, which is, they'll either verify that or they'll vote on a ballot marking device printer, the BMD, which is on the left. In Eureka, we used the VVPAT until the last election, the PPP, where I switched to the ballot marking device. There are currently only 4 counties using the BMD printers at this time, but it has been expressed by the other clerks in the state that they, I think, are possibly wanting to transition to the BMD in the future. So with the VVPAT, an individual votes are stored electronically on a USB thumb drive that's plugged into the side of the ICX. And the voter relies on the paper roll printout, a verification of their vote. And it's shown behind the little plastic window. It lights up as they cast their vote. And at the end of the night, the USB thumb drives are removed from the machines and brought to the election board, where they are inserted into a Dominion election tabulation computer and downloaded. And that's how those votes are counted. So the difference with the BMD is that after the vote is cast on the ICX, a paper ballot actually prints out of a regular printer. Then the voter can, in Eureka, we have locked ballot boxes that sit with every single ballot printer and ICX machine. So as soon as their ballot is voted and printed out, they're able to review it and then immediately slide it into the locked ballot box. A chain of custody at the end of the night. These boxes are unlocked by sworn election workers who verify the number of ballots voted on the machine and match that number to the ballots that are located in that box. A chain of custody form is filled out and placed in a sealed bag with the voted ballots, and these ballots are delivered to the election board. They in turn make sure they receive the same number of ballots that are on the chain of custody form. The ballots are then sent through a ballot scanner, a Dominion ICC scanner, where they are tabulated. Even though we are only discussing in-person voting, I just wanted to note that these ballots are handled and counted exactly the same way as all the mail-in ballots. They're scanned in batches, stored in sealed bags, and then these ballots are then stored in a locked room. All the ballots, whether voted in person or mailed in, are transferred securely to the election board to be tabulated. As Mark mentioned, we have a polling location that is hundreds of miles north, and I work closely with the sheriff's office and his deputies to safely transfer those voted ballots back down to the county board in Eureka. All chain of custody forms are filled out even by the law enforcement. I chose to migrate to the BMD after listening to the voters' concerns in my county. People didn't really understand how the USB and VVPAT electronic systems worked. I had heard things like they thought that their votes were being transferred through Wi-Fi directly to the secretary's office. They really thought that all of their information, their voter information, was recorded on those machines, and people knew how they voted. So they actually prefer to have and hold a tangible voted ballot in their hand and place it in the secure ballot box themselves. Or in other counties, they even have, Dominion has bigger equipment that they can actually turn and scan their own ballot, and it will be tabulated immediately. We didn't purchase that portion, but we just put them they're in a locked, secure ballot box, and they do that entire process themselves. It's simple for my voters to understand and use, which I feel helps them to have more confidence in the process. And the counting of the ballots is held in our commission chambers and is completely open to the public, so people can watch the process all the way through. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you for your time today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Scott, Carson City Clerk Recorder.
Well, thank you very much, Clerk Recorder Bowling. And I think we all appreciate the wonderful gift Eureka County gave us of getting to serve with Senator Gokachia. We're very excited for his retirement for him, but I think we're all sad that we won't get to serve with him next session. But thank you for lending him to us both in the Assembly and the Senate. And we really was a wonderful gift getting to serve with him out of your county. Now we've got William Scott Hohen, our Clerk Recorder for Carson City.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is William Scott Hohen. I'm your elected Clerk Recorder and Public Administrator here in Carson City. And I'm going to talk about the ES&S equipment that Lander and Carson City have. So if you go to that next slide, okay, got it. Carson City made the decision in 2018, Sue Merriweather 2 clerks ago made the decision to go to ES&S, and Carson City is thrilled. When you hear about BMD or the ballot marketing devices, it is so important to the Carson City voters that they can physically see their vote and verify their vote before that vote is tabulated. So I can't stress enough the importance of this paper ballot. So when we go through the check-in process, they are issued this blank ballot with a barcode at the top that basically says what precinct they're at and what ballot style, an R, a D, a nonpartisan ballot that should be displayed on the device to make that selection. Once they select it on this voter verifiable piece of paper, it's printed out for them. So the voter can literally review all of the cast decisions that they made. And if by chance they review this and they see, you know what, I didn't select somebody for this race, but I really wanted to, we literally could spoil or void this ballot and reissue this so they can make sure that before their vote is counted, they can go through the process again and repeat the process with a new ballot. So if you go to the step-by-step, a lot of it is similar to what Kathy described. So Station A is our poll pad. That's our check-in voter station, where we actually go through the process of number 1, checking to see if they voted previously. So Station A is the only station that's connected to the internet for us because we have to be connected to our voter registration system. Station A lets us determine whether or not that person has mailed in a ballot and had already previously cast that ballot, or maybe have showed up a day before and tried to vote again. So Station A is where we, number one, ask them to surrender their ballot, or we spoil their mail ballot to make sure they can't vote that mail ballot. Some people want to take that ballot back and destroy it themselves. Somebody just surrenders it to us, and then we store that for the 22-month process that we go through. Once we spoil that ballot, we go through the signature verification process. I actually was a poll worker in 2020 before becoming the clerk recorder in 2022, and I was surprised that probably 80–90% of the people that were showing up really wanted to show ID. They were reaching for their wallet to show ID. But we don't require ID. We just need to require their signature so we can match the signature on file. Once we go through the signature verification process, we print out this blank ballot card that basically says what ballot that they have. They then move on to Station B. Station B is basically a glorified printer that they insert this card in, and on the screen pops up their ballot. And it looks like the sample ballot that we mail out. They literally tap on each race and select each candidate that they want for that race. And once they make their selections, it will go through a variety of different review. Are you sure you want that person? Are you sure you want to print that out? But then it's printed out in its final form with the barcodes of the associated race. Now, this ballot marketing device, this printer that is printing these cards out, is not connected to the internet. It is not tabulating results at all. It's just a printer. It's just printing out their ballot. They move to Section C, or Station C, which is our DS200 tabulator. That is where they're going to insert this ballot. That is when it gets counted. When they insert this ballot, it is cast. I can't take it back, can't change it. That's why we ask them, check these to make sure you're voting for the right person before we actually put it in the machine. C, the tabulator, is got a USB thumb drives. It's not connected to the internet. It's got a USB device where it actually is tabulating and counting these ballots in these races. And we don't look at those results until election night, Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, when we go through the process of tabulating and combining all of them. We have the C device set up for early election, and then we have it set up for election day, so we can keep those statistics completely separate. But these cards, once they're entered into that C tabulator, they are then counted in that USB thumb drive. These ballots are then dropped down at the bottom, and then we transport these ballots back every night, just like Kathy said, in a secure way with a bipartisan team. We joke around that it's the Pony Express because they're important to us. They're important to our voters. They come back, they're stored. It's always available to us to go back and check and audit, and we have duplicate systems in place, and we have logs that we keep track of when every little step happens to make sure we have chain of custody. In some cases, on election day, we even have the sheriff involved helping us transport the ballots down the road to the courthouse. D, the unit D there you see, those are our mail ballot tabulators. So we had one, Carson had one, a lower volume machine, the 450, and that was fine for 4,000 ballots, but we had to get another machine, number one, to have a backup, and then number two, just to handle the higher volumes of mail ballots. We're probably expecting 16,000 to 18,000 mail ballots coming through this election in the primary. But those ballots, again, that counting system, the results are put on thumb drives. It's not connected to the internet. So at election night, we take the thumb drives from C and D, we put them into an election management software computer, which is Station E. It's a dedicated computer that's hardened, locked down, nothing else is on it but election management software system that we can then bring in the data from the thumb drives, and we can let it do its magic in terms of calculate the results, and then we can report it to the Secretary of State. It's important that that unit is only used for that. It's not connected to the internet. Once we have results, then we have to export that results and upload it into a secure environment to the Secretary of State, where they then take that information and use it. I've got to say that Our voters really, really appreciate the ballot marking device. The printing out of the card has increased the confidence in our voting system here in Carson City tremendously. It's been a well worthwhile investment for us, and we're going to probably stay with that. I've got to say, election systems and software, our vendor has just been phenomenal. I actually have them on election day for 2 or 3 days to help us through the whole process, to back us up in case they have any issues or problems. They're always there to answer anything that goes awry, and we're happy to have that equipment. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Chair, Mark Velasha for the record. I was simply going to say pending questions. That's all we have.
Thank you. Members, any questions for any of our presenters? Up in Carson City, any questions, Senator Daley?
No, thank you, Chair.
Down here in the Sawyer Building, members, any questions? I guess I have one question for Clerk Recorder Hohen. How long has Carson City been using the ESS/NS systems? And if you mentioned it, I apologize if I missed it.
Yeah, it's 2018, so we've gone through quite a few elections with that equipment.
Great. And then follow up just in terms of maintenance updates. Have there been any issues, or do you find that that works pretty well for Carson City?
One of the, thank you, Chair. One of those, again, Scott Hohen, Clerk Recorder for Carson City. One of the things that I'm pleasantly surprised about when it comes to our equipment, part of the maintenance contracts that we have, ES&S literally comes in a month before the election and runs through every piece of equipment, literally taking care of everything, clean it, adjust it, tune it, make sure it's working in its proper order. And if there ever was an issue with a piece of equipment, we always can take it out of service, but they're always there before the next election to fix that. We've had good success in Carson City with this equipment, but the vendor literally goes through with a fine-tooth comb on all of it, from the check-in station to the ballot marketing device to the tabulators. They do a great job. It's almost overkill, you would think, in terms of going through every single unit, but they do a good job to make sure that we don't have failures in the election.
That's excellent to hear. Thank you, Clerk Recorder Hohen. And then Clerk Recorder Bowling in Eureka, I just had a similar question regarding the system. You use the Dominion system, correct?
Correct.
And certainly being in Eureka County and with the large distances of polling places and being more remote, I wonder, how do you feel is the responsiveness of the vendor in terms of issues you have with the machines, upgrading, software, hardware? I just wonder if you could tell us what kind of experience you've had with that vendor.
Yes, Catherine Bowling, Clerk Recorder, Eureka County, for the record. Yeah, we have the same type of relationship with the Dominion company that Scott has with his company. As a matter of fact, they're coming Monday. We are starting our pre-lat where we set up all of our equipment, and they go through everything. And they're always available by phone, Zoom meetings. I have never, ever not been able to get a hold of somebody to answer a question or to help me. They've been absolutely wonderful. So it's very similar.
That's good to hear. And they're willing to come out in the long distances to get to Eureka and where you've got the machines. Okay, great. All right.
Yep,
well,
they'll come
thank
out.
you. They will. Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. Well, not seeing any additional questions. Thank you very much. And Chief Deputy Secretary of State, please go ahead.
Chair Orenshaw, if I may, thank you so much, Gabriel DeCara, for the record. I just wanted to add to Clerk Treasurer Bowling's the ballot marking devices, the Dominion ballot marking devices. She indicated that those printers were just a standard printer, which they are initially. They are a commercial off-the-shelf printer. However, there are additional security upgrades and modifications made by Dominion voting systems before they are used in elections. So I just want to be clear that the counties aren't just buying a printer at Target and hooking it up to an election machine, that there's additional security steps that go into those printers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Deputy Secretary of State. Thanks for that clarification. With that, we're going to end item 5. We really appreciate the presentations. Thank you very much to our clerk recorders and our representatives from the Secretary of State's office. We are going to skip ahead. We're actually going to take item 6 last. And I wonder if we can go to item 7. We have a presentation relating to ballot processing capacity from Lorena Portillo, our Clark County Registrar of Voters, Carrie Ann Burgess, Interim Registrar of Voters in Washoe County. Thank you very much for being here. Good morning, Registrar Portillo. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. Lorena Portillo, Clark County Registrar of Voters. Thank you for having us. Very happy to be here to share a little bit of what our team has been doing in the past months, the past year, to ensure that the 2024 elections are as smooth as possible, considering that, it's a large turnout during this year. We're really excited to share with you. First, I'll share, though, a little bit of what we see in the trends of mail ballot statistics. So I'm going to go over mail ballot statistics, increase in capacity due to that, but also at the end, I'll share a little bit about the preparations for the next agenda item. But just so you can see here, in the presidential preference primary alone, we saw a lot of folks participating in the mail ballot voting process, close to 75%. That just gives us an idea of what we are to see in the next election cycle. However, the presidential preference primary was a little different. It was unique. It was new. So it's not totally what can indicate what we see in a primary and a general. However, even in the past elections in 2022, you can see over 50% participated in the mail ballot voting process. It's become more and more popular, and it's an easy and very convenient way for folks to cast their ballot. They can deliver their ballot envelope signed at any of our vote centers, at any of them, either during early voting or on election day, and at various city clerks' offices. So they find it very convenient, of course, and we have a postage paid envelope that allows that convenience also. And so with that said, we are increasing our capacity. How? Our tabulation equipment. So we have mail ballot readers and we have the flash drive readers. It's very important to note that we started out with 2 in 2020. We slowly increased to 4, and now we have 6 of the mail ballot readers. Each one in an hour can read 8,000. And so we have 6 now that can fully read anything from 48,000 to 8,000 per machine an hour. Also, we have increased the allocation of our tabulation flash drives. So we have a flash drive reader that we used to have about 10 stations. Now we have 26 stations. What that means is that during election night, we don't have a bottleneck. If all sites close at 7, like we all wish, they do, and they all come in at the same time, where it's going to be easier and faster for us to release those unofficial election day results, which we all really want sooner than later, hopefully before midnight. So that was very important to us to increase. So a sufficient amount of investment has been made to get to that point. We have tremendous vendor support. I love to hear that, other counties such as ourselves, without our vendor support, we can't do what we do. We have special training that's conducted before each election just to go over the processes, and we have done that with Dominion as well. They also helped us with adding those additional flash drive stations and those mail ballot readers, And so it's just a great thing that we have that relationship, and they'll be there during the election cycle. That's another very important piece. We can't not do it without them. They must be there with us to see and make sure that this increase of capacity is also running very smoothly. So they will be there to help us during that time. We have implemented also double shifts. A double shift is new. We started in the presidential preference primary. Of course, it's hard to address how efficient it was because the volume wasn't there. In a primary, we will see the volume increase considerably, so we can really test and see and evaluate how well this will work for the general. And that requires additional staff. We have invested significantly in additional staff. County commissioners, county management are very supportive, and they know that without staff, we cannot do what we do, especially permanent staff members. We cannot leave those stations unsupervised. Even though we have hundreds of folks that we hire that are temporary employees, we need permanent staff members that are experts in their field to run the election. So we're very happy about that. So this is all new. We're excited to see the positive impacts, hopefully soon. The mail ballot processing will be much more efficient, we believe, because we can continue the processes not just during one shift, but a double shift, which means the different processes that we have, whether it's the intake, whether it's the manual signature verification, will continue throughout the day and into the evening, which is new to us. In that what we really want is also for the voter to see when the mail ballot is submitted. Let's say they drop it off at the polling site. We want to be able to process that ballot. So the voter will be able to see that we received their ballot that evening. That is our goal. We are actually adding additional pickups, which we didn't have in 2022. We did start out in the presidential preference primary. Of course, the volume wasn't there to see the significant impact, but we are positive we'll see something more this time around. So visibility to the voter is really important. They can see on our online voter registered services link that we have, they can see that we have accepted their mail ballot or rejected for whatever reason. Let's say there's a signature that's being questioned, they will see that on our website sooner than the next day. Tabulation might happen the next day, but the intake process will certainly happen that evening. That is our goal. Unofficial results posted sooner without sacrificing, accuracy and the integrity of the process. Always that is very, very important to us. We are hoping that with the not only the additional pickups during early voting, but the double pickups during election day will help us intake those mail ballot envelopes sooner. Keep in mind that's step one, right? That's the raw count. The raw count meaning their envelopes. And we are updating our voter registration system considering if they're going to be accepted with a accepted signature or rejected and it goes into signature cure. So that's where the intake process happens and where it starts. So we still, of course, have to keep in mind, as much as we want things to go faster and we want it more efficient, we do always consider the accuracy and integrity. We have to make sure we don't skip a step. There's no steps that are skipped in the mail ballot process, but also in our flash drive process. However, we also have the postmark deadlines. We will continue to receive after Election Day mail ballots that are postmarked up until Friday that are not postmarked and that are postmarked on Saturday after Election Day. And of course, we have Monday that we have until Monday after Election Day to receive any signature cures. And on Tuesday, the provision. So life doesn't end for us on Election Day. We continue until the very day of canvass. And of course, there's much reporting to do for the reconciliation of everything that occurred during an election cycle. So there's a lot of work to do even after the election cycle. And so that's what I have as far as what we will see. I apologize for not moving the slide. That is the impacts that we're hoping to see during the primary. Of course, again, I reiterate, this is a test of what we can do with what the equipment we have, with the space that we have, and the additional resources we were able to accumulate this time around. So I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Registrar Portillo, for the excellent presentation, thorough with all the great information. Members, any questions for our Clark County Registrar of Voters, either down here at Sawyer Building, up Carson City, or online? I just have a quick, Vice Chair Mosca, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all the clerks, recorders, treasurers, everybody, because I know it's a very busy time of year, so we appreciate getting all these updates. And so my only question for you, thank you for this great overview, and going to see it, I think really helped to understand how it works, and the public can go and see it, and I think that that's very important too. But how much time do you spend on the signature and curing, if you can share more about that?
Lorena Portillo, Clark County Registrar of Voters. Thank you for the question. Signature curing is ongoing. As soon as we start receiving mail ballots, it's an ongoing process. So it really doesn't end until the Monday after Election Day. So it's continuous. It depends on the volume, of course, and when folks call or mail in their letter to, verify their signature, or text. We also have text to cure available. So the convenience is definitely there, and it is a fast process once the voter reaches out to us. But it's just continuous. That's the best way to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess one question I have, looking at the increased preference for mail ballots among Clark County voters, and I wondered, do you have any projection, either for the upcoming primary or for the general, as to how many mail ballots you might receive, or is that just kind of too unknown at this point? It certainly seems like there's going to be tons of interest in both the primary and the general, and I wondered if you have any kind of estimate as to how many you think might come in, and capacity. I know with the double shifts and the additional equipment, in terms of handling that, what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorena Portillo, Clark County Registrar of Voters. Our team is always looking to the future and making sure, what would we do if everyone votes by mail, right? And that is our thought process, and that's why we have increased the capacity by so much. We really invested in equipment. I mean, we tripled actually the flash drive stations. We only had 10, and now we have 26. Now also the mail ballot readers. They're huge devices that can take and really read, mail ballots quite quickly, but we don't take that for granted. We want to make sure we are available to process in an efficient way what we get, regardless if it's 75% or 100%. Of course, this year will be a true trend that we follow. We are watching it very closely because it will make a significant difference, even in the in-person voting capacity that we, hire for and what we plan for. If we see more of the mail ballot voting, method being used, then we have to consider in-person reductions because we are at full capacity. We are completely full capacity in person and by mail, and that takes up a significant amount of resources, which we don't mind if that's what the voter loves and likes to do in person. We love it as well, but we have to consider, every year what the trend is. So we are watching it very, very closely as well.
Well, thank you for being here to make this presentation so close to the upcoming primary and early voting opening. Thank you for everything you're doing, especially for all of our friends and neighbors here in Clark County, to make sure that there are so many options that someone can try to vote, whether it's getting off work, picking up their kids from school, finishing, double shift, whether they want to vote by mail, vote early, vote on Election Day. There are so many options to try to make it accessible for people. So thank you, Registrar Portillo. And any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. I think we will now move on to Carrie Ann Burgess, our Interim Registrar of Voters in Washoe County. Thank you, Ms. Burgess. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Chair, and the committee for inviting me to come and present on what we are doing. I am the Registrar of Voters, or the Interim Registrar of Voters for Washoe County, and we are talking about how much we have grown in the last especially 5 to 10 years. In 2018, we only had 7.2 turnout. I'm not big on reading the PowerPoint, so I know everybody can read. We have grown exponentially. Our mail ballot processing room has grown. We are working on even growing it more. The county leadership has realized that we are at capacity with our current space. So we're looking at growing a little bit more in a different space. This is our ballot machine that we are using currently, it is over 15 years old. We bought it new, or we bought it used in 2020 because of all the mail ballots that we were accepting. Because of that, we are looking at upgrading that between the primary and the general to one, get a faster machine, and one that can sort our ballots a lot faster, so that we can go through the process a little bit faster. We do have 2 people in our office that work on this machine exclusively, but our vendor also comes out and helps. They maintain this machine meticulously. They actually bought the company who actually made this machine, so it's kind of secondhand, and they are doing a wonderful job to make sure that it works for the primary, and hopefully we'll be able to upgrade it for the general, and making sure that we have oh, well, all right, thank you. That's everything that I just said about that. So our ballot cages are other thing that we have upgraded. Before we had our ballots, our scanning machines, our adjudicating machines, and also our duplication machines inside this cage where you could not see it for observers. What we have done is added more shelving in here for the more ballots that we are expecting. We're expecting at least half of our population to do mail-in ballots. Out of our 342,000 or 24,000 registered voters, we are expecting at least half to do mail-in ballots, if not more. So we're expecting that kind of capacity. We are expecting that. We added space, so in case every single person in Washoe County, just like Lorena said in Clark, if everybody votes by mail, we have the capacity to do that. So this is our cage. We have upgraded it. We have added more shelving just to make it more available. One thing that is absolutely essential is that all of our ballots are 100% secure all of the time. So when we get them from the post office, it's actually in a hard case that is sealed from the post office. Our staff grabs it, bipartisan team. We have a police escort there and back, and the seals are not broken until they get back to our office. So our ballots never leave this room. Only certain people actually go into the cage to retrieve ballots, to make sure that they're processed, to make sure that everything is 100% secure. The speed of processing, we do have a couple bottlenecks that we are working on. Signature verification is one, and we are working with the vendor with the new machine that we're going to be getting to make sure that we have automatic signature verification. And when we do that machine, we are going to get, we're going to have the public come in and test it before we have the general election so they can see how it works. The other part is extraction. That is a bipartisan team. We have 9 stations for it that they sit and they take the ballots out of the envelopes. We do that for 2 reasons. One, nobody sees the voter identification, so the ballots or the envelopes are actually facing away from them when they're extracting, so they don't see whose envelope they're actually opening. One person takes the ballot, puts it at a 90-degree angle, and is able to, the other person is then taking that envelope or that ballot out, making sure that there's no marks, extra marks on it, making sure that it's not damaged, so that they can put it into our scanning machines. That is a timely process, having people do it. We're looking at upgrading that to make sure that we can do it a lot faster. With staffing, we have 19 people on our staff, permanent staff. With that, we add between, just to help with processing ballots, we have between 15 and 20 Washoe County employees that actually come back and volunteer to help process our ballots. With that, we also have temp employees that help with phones, help with call centers, help with the public, and we add probably 15 to 20 just in our front office to help with that also. With that, we do have, again, a little few bottlenecks, so we are working on those and making sure that we are fully staffed. We have made our staff do staggered shifts, so we have 2 12-hour shifts. One comes in at 7, the other one comes in at 10, so that way we're working anywhere between between 6 and 7 a.m. every day to 10 to 11 p.m. every day. Because we have a little bit more limited staff, that's what we're able to do right now, but we did it in the PPP and it worked really well. And we're going to continue that. Along with what clerk does, we have added more pickup times for early voting for our ballots to make sure that they get back and processed and received the same day that we receive them in our office. And on election day, we did 3 pickups. So we'll have 3 different pickups for election day so that when election night comes, it's either been received from the vote centers or we're able to get them the majority of the way processed. I'm not going to say we're going to get them all processed that night. It's a long night. Everybody's coming in. But we are working on making sure that everything gets processed in a timely manner. Right now, once we are able to process them completely, it usually takes about 48 hours to process a ballot completely from start to finish. We're going to try to cut that down to 24 to 36 hours. That is something that our staff is committed to, and they want to make sure that everything is done in a timely manner, but also done correctly. In closing, we expect it to grow. County management is knowing that we need to grow. I know that because Reno is growing and Washoe County is growing, that the capacity that we have currently is going to be limited, and that we want to make sure that every vote is counted in a timely manner. And as every election day comes and every early voting day comes, we are updating our processes, our speed and our efficiency. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Interim Registrar Burgess, and thank you for everything you're doing to keep up with the growing population there in Washoe County. And I'd like to open it up for any questions. I'll start up in Carson City. Senator Daley.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Seaver-Scancer, Assemblywoman Dickman, any questions for our Interim Washoe County Registrar? Down here at the Sawyer Building, Vice Chair Mosca, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and great to see you, and thank you for this very important information. I don't know as much, but I did want to ask if the change in the post office up north, how you see that would impact with our voting. Thank you.
Great question. Carrie Ann Burgess, Interim Registrar of Voters for Washoe County. Great question. We have lots of conversations with the USPS. Yes, it would affect it, but I've kind of let that go to our county is in those conversations. I've kind of backed away because I am concentrating on our election, and we actually just had a special election, so we've had 2 going on at the same time. So it's going to affect us in the future. They keep telling us it's not going to happen until 2025. But yeah, there's ongoing conversations, and our county management is taking care of that.
Thank you very much. And I guess one question I have, with the explosive growth in population up in Washoe County, and with the upgrades you have, do you feel like you will have enough of the capacity for handling the ballots that you'll be getting, or do you think you'll still be playing catch up?
Thank you. Great question. Carrie Ann Burgess, we are more than ready, absolutely more than ready for anything that comes in. Our staff is 100% committed to making sure that we do not fall behind on anything that we work on. They want to make sure that our ballots are processed correctly, efficiently, just as much as I am. My entire staff and team are committed, 100% committed to making sure that this election goes on without a hitch, and that is increasing our capacity to process all of our ballots in a timely manner. So they know they're going to be working long hours. They know they're going to be working a lot of days, weekends, and they're ready for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything you and your staff are doing for all our voters up in Washoe County. With that, I'd like to close that agenda item, and I'd like to move on to agenda item number 8, where we have update on preparations for the 2024 primary election. And again, we're very lucky to have our Chief Deputy Secretary of State, Gabriel Takara, Mark Wolashin, our Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, Clark County Registrar of Voters, Lorena Portillo, and our Washoe County Interim Registrar of Voters, Carrie Ann Burgess. And we're very fortunate also to have our Secretary of State today. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Orenshaw, Vice Chair Mosca, and other members of the committee. Thank you very much for having us today to talk about the preparations for the June primary. For the record, I'm Cisco Aguilar, Secretary of State. Before Chief Deputy DeCara and Deputy Volashin take over to discuss how our state, county, and city election officials are preparing, I wanted to talk with you about a number of initiatives we have taken to encourage people to vote, recruit poll workers, and increase trust with the public. As you have heard from the counties, there is a consistent need for additional poll workers. They make our democracy function, so this is a high priority for us. Last month, we announced a partnership with Vet the Vote to encourage veterans to become poll workers. We even had a few sign up with Registrar Portillo's team during the event, which was really cool to see. We're also speaking with a number of different groups, including high schoolers. Poll workers can be 16 in Nevada. Having high schoolers participate in the process does several things. One, it exposes them to a process that they may not know exists. You may light a fire in them that they didn't know they have. But also, two, you're bringing members of the community into the process. If your high schooler is working a polling location, you're probably going to get the entire family to come out and vote. Not only the family, but also the neighbors. Also, too, when you talk about language access, these individuals speak the home language, and when you're able to assist in making sure everybody has access to the ballot box, it only increases turnout. You may also have seen that we released our first report on investigations into reported election violations. We will be releasing these reports quarterly to increase the transparency and trust with the public. I will note that many of the allegations received regarding elections are closed with no violation. Sometimes it's because a voter isn't aware of the elections law, so it's an opportunity to educate them. Other unfounded allegations may be sent to in efforts to overwhelm our office, which is not fair, given the amount of work that our staff is doing. No matter the reason, we are fully investigating each report and respond to every constituent. This effort is accomplished by our new elections investigation team, thank you, that was approved by the legislature last year. Their efforts will be essential as we approach the primary and November general to upkeep Nevada's secure elections. Before I pass it over to our team, I want to emphasize the hard work that our counties are doing to prepare for each election. Election workers are our unsung heroes of democracy. We need to give election officials every chance to succeed. That means more resources to do their job. I know we say this every time, but our office is talking with county election staff, county commissioners, and legislators pretty much every day to make sure these teams are well set and prepared for success. The Secretary's office has stepped up in to help. We've had staff members go to Esmeralda County just this last week to assist the team. But as we look ahead to the legislative session, more consistent funding and resources will be crucial. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and we do appreciate all your office's efforts to try to help with election access and helping the county clerks, especially in our remote parts of the state. And Chief Deputy Secretary of State Takara, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here because the chairs are more comfortable. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Volashin to detail our preparation.
We appreciate you being here to answer questions. Thank you so much. Deputy Volashin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. Good morning. Mark Volashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Real briefly, before I turn it over to the clerks and registrars to be able to address their more specific actions, I do want to highlight that, again, the preparations they will talk about here momentarily are but a fraction of the workload that they have been working on over the last few months. Truly, election preparation and administration is a multi-month, in some cases arguably multi-year process to ensure that the voters are able to execute their rights as identified in our state and federal constitutions and pursuant to our laws. That being said, again, as we close in on these last 2 weeks prior to the start of early voting, which begins again 2 weeks from this Saturday, the workload will continue to be pretty immense to ensure voters have access and that the ballots are counted, tabulated, and reported in a secure and timely manner. That workload will continue through June 21st. Again, deliberately skipping right past June 11th being Election Day, to highlight the fact that there's 10 additional days prior to the deadline for canvasses before the work is done. And then also just to flag it for your awareness, and as a reminder, June 26th is a petition deadline for constitutional petitions. So while many of the clerks and registrars, as they talk about the workload and go over in detail the things that they're working on to prepare for the election itself, again, just please be mindful that, that their workloads will likely continue past June 26th as they continue that very important role of validating the signatures relating to an initiative petition to see if it warrants being on our ballot in a future election cycle. That being said, I'll start here in Carson City and turn it over to Interim Registrar Burgess.
Thank you, Mark. Carrie Ann Burgess, Registrar of Voters, Washoe County. We have updated our mail ballot processing room. We have made it easier for observers to see. We have taken out a half wall. We've made it so our observer area is 180 degrees instead of just partial. We've moved all of our equipment out of our cage onto our floor so you can see every inch. We have also readjusted the cameras that we have of a live feed. That live feed will start the first day of early voting, so you can see every inch of the floor. We encourage all of our observers to come. It's a first come, first serve. You come, sign in, you sign your little oath, make sure that you're going to be respectful of everybody else. But we have that room for a specific reason. We want to make sure that our constituents can come and see the process. We want them to come and see. We want them to participate. We have also maintained all of our observer stations and all of our vote locations. It is off to the side. There are 4 seats. They are more than welcome to come. I want to make that very clear. Washoe County and the entire state, with the help of the Secretary of State's office, we make sure that our observers have a space and that they can come and watch our entire process. We have all of our vote centers, as of last night when I left work, are currently staffed. That will continue to change up until Election Day. Just because stuff comes up, people drop out, we have to replace them. So all of ours are currently staffed. We do have 24 early voting centers, which is no small feat. We have been working on contracts and making sure that our vote centers are strategically placed so that everybody has a place to go vote if they want to vote in person, and making sure that it's not a long distance for them and making sure that it's not a long line. We do the same thing for Election Day. We have 49 for Election Day. And then we also make sure, on top of all of this, our elections usually start between about 120 to 180 days before an election. So we are already ramping up. I just got an E- calendar from one of our vendors. We are actually starting to work on everything that we need to do for our November election before we even have our June election. So not only are we working on one election, we're also starting to work on the November election also. So because of that, we all work long hours. There's nobody in my office right now that works under a 10-hour day. I'm working 14 to 16-hour days along with the majority of my staff just to make sure that we are completely ready and everything is in place for everybody to be able to vote for mail ballots and our in-person. One thing that the Secretary did say, we actually have a couple unique instances in our county that we have an election worker that has been an election worker for a long time. She was telling her grandson about it. So her grandson convinced his mom and grandma to come back, and they're actually all 3 going to be election workers this year. So for this primary, the grandson is 18 years old, and this will be his first time being able to vote, so he's really kind of excited to be able to work it with his mom and his grandma. It's moments and stories like that, and also those who are able to vote for the very first time, regardless of age, that make our job worthwhile. I absolutely love to hear stories like that. So when my staff came and told me that, we actually have a couple of those. That's huge. And we just had our media day in Washoe County yesterday. We have an election worker who's been with us for over 20 years, who's worked every single election in over 20 years. So we awarded him yesterday with a nice certificate that we so appreciate it. Like the Secretary said, we cannot do our jobs without our election workers. They are absolutely our unsung heroes. So making sure that all of our vote centers are staffed is, again, no small feat. Making sure that they know that they're valued and protected is of the utmost importance to not only me, but all of the other clerks in the state and also the Secretary of State's office. We work very closely with them to make sure that we are all prepared. So, thank you.
And Interim Registrar Burgess, thank you for your presentation, and thank you again for mentioning all the election workers and everyone who takes time off, whether they're part-time, whether they might be other staff with other departments who come and try to help the election. And that was wonderful hearing about the 18-year-old and the mom and grandma wanting to work as election workers to help serve the public. Now we'll come back up here to Carson City, and Registrar Portillo, thank you again for joining us to talk a little bit about preparations for the primary election here in Clark County.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. Lorena Portillo, Clark County Register of Voters. I do want to begin by giving great thanks to the Secretary of State and to his team, because they have been supportive since day one. We really couldn't do what we do without their collaboration, with their support, their great ideas. They did come to visit several times now, and we really appreciate those visits because great ideas come through collaboration, and I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. They should be commended for their efforts, and also with the fact that they appreciate just as much as we do our poll workers. We cannot do it without them, but not missing the fact that we have temporary workers in all levels that help us during the election. They come back every year, even during a presidential year where they know they're going to sacrifice a lot of time away from their family. So yes, a grateful heart is definitely a way to get through this election cycle. And with that said, I want to reiterate what Mark Velashin did mention. You know, this is an effort that doesn't start this year. It didn't start in 2024. In fact, for us, it started in 2021 when we began the implementation of a poll pad, a brand new poll pad to help check in voters, and a brand new voter registration system. We have a lot of volume. We have a lot of equipment to turn around and program and test. So we have to start quite a bit ahead of the game because we are always looking for the next election, looking forward, and the preparations start way ahead. And even though we're here today, you know, we've already sent out the ballots for overseas, military. We already sent out, we're working on sending out the in-state. We already sent out the out-of-state. You know, we're always preparing way ahead. It started for us more than a year ago. Sample ballots are in the mail. We're very excited about that. It is a daily process for sample ballots. However, all in-state mail ballots will be in the mail on May 16th, no later May 16th. So we're excited about that. We do use the EASE program. It's a very convenient program for overseas and military folks, ADA tribal nation folks to also use. We're also working on that. Currently, we only have 31 that have participated, but in the past, we've had approximately 1,500 that have participated, which we're very thankful with the collaboration. This program is tested, considerably before the election cycle to make sure it functions properly and the processes are in place according to regulations. We have our early voting sites and our election day sites all set and ready to go. We're already in the delivery process of our tents. We have at least 9 tents around Clark County, and we have to begin the process way ahead of time. We have 30 to 35 during early voting every single day that is open to the public. Any voter can vote at any vote center, which is very convenient here in Clark County. We're a 24/7 county, so it's really convenient. And are also drop box locations. Very important to remember that because folks love to come to our sites and drop off their mail ballot. Election day, we have 132 vote sites that also are vote centers. A voter can conveniently go to any vote center and cast their ballot either on the machine or drop off their mail ballot. We also have training and recruitment continuously going on. We train and recruit over 3,000 workers. Again, those unsung heroes that Secretary of State properly addressed them as because they help us get through busiest elections, the toughest elections there are, and this year is one of those. Very, very busy election cycle. We just received over 5,000 voter registration applications, and so we have a lot of folks working today, which should be their day off, but they're going to work through the weekend to ensure we meet that May 14th deadline, which is the standard registration deadline. And we're sure we're going to get a little bit more on Monday and Tuesday, but we're there to help. And we have hotlines. We also brought in our hotline folks. This is signature curing. This is team lead hotlines. This is registration hotlines. Very important hotlines that not only help the voters in the process of signature curing, but any questions that they might have. Also, team leads. Team leads need support as well. You know, they're out there helping us at all these sites, and we need to be readily available to answer their questions if they have any issues that arise. We are there with subject matter experts. They're very well-trained folks that continuously come back and help us during the election cycle, and many of those being permanent as well. Security, we worked really hard, having several tabletop exercises. Security is a very important piece of an election cycle. We take it very seriously. Not only did we do this before the presidential preference primary, but also before the primary. We collaborate with Secretary of State, city clerks, a lot of law enforcement folks, and of course, management of those cities, just to go over sometimes torturous exercises. You don't ever want to think there'll be an emergency, but you have to be prepared. So I believe we are very much prepared for any emergency that we may have, whether it's evacuation or a fire, etc., or electrical. So that and much more is being done to get to Election Day and early voting, and I'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Registrar Portillo, for everything you and your staff are doing to try to make sure that folks will have access and be able to participate this year. Thank you so much. Members, any questions for Registrar Portillo? Up in Carson City, Senator Daley, any questions for our Clark County Registrar? No? Okay, well then, Senator Sievers-Gansert, Assemblywoman Dickman, any questions? Well, we are appreciative of everything you do, and just making it possible, whether voters want to vote by mail, vote early, go to vote centers. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you to the Secretary and your tremendous staff and up in Washoe County. And I know we had our registrars from Carson earlier and Eureka County. And I know if others are listening, we do appreciate everything you're doing and everyone who volunteers to come and work on the elections and be there. And that's, like as the Secretary said, our unsung heroes. So thank you very much. With that, we will now close agenda item number 8, and we will backtrack to agenda item number 6. And I think, speaking of our ease system, we may need to be at ease for just a little bit for broadcasting to try to coordinate at the presentation. So members, I think we'll be at ease, and I'll wait for the signal from broadcasting before we get a presentation of the tremendous ease system that our Secretary and his staff have put into place. So we'll be at ease.
Mr. Chair, Mark Voloshin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. The demonstration is prepared and ready to go at your convenience.
And Deputy Secretary of State Woloshyn, I am so sorry. Could you repeat what you said? I apologize.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Voloshin, the demonstration, the ease demo is ready whenever you are.
Thank you very much. Members, I will call our meeting back to order. And thank you, Deputy Secretary of State, for this demonstration. This is actually great for us to get to see this and for the public.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. Again, Mark Voloshin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. I very much appreciate this opportunity to provide a live demonstration to you of the effective absentee system for elections. We've had previous meetings about the nature of the program, the statutory foundation that led to its development by the CRAC SOS IT team. Again, this is a proprietary application. So there are just but a few minor administrative notes that I would like to provide before we jump right into it. First and foremost, you may notice that I am, using a state-issued computer. You may not be able to tell directly, but I have VPN'd into the state network. That is important because this demonstration, I want to stress right from the get-go, is done on our state user acceptance testing, or UAT, URL. This test site that you can see in front of you, and you'll see here momentarily, it's got a big red logo. It says test environment. This is not specifically accessible by the public. I do want to highlight that, again, if a voter is covered by this program, nves.gov is the website to go to, and you can see the distinct difference between this page here, which again I'm now showing on my screen, which is the live ease site that has been activated since the 22nd, as well as, again, that is live now. I'm not going to do a demo on that one, but again, on this one, the test site, again, which is important to note, so that as I quickly go through and provide test information and for demonstration purposes, there's no concerns about attesting to something that is simply not true. Okay, so the ease system, again, we mentioned it is turned on along the same timelines as directed by the uniform.
Deputy Woloshyn, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We think we might have a little technical difficulty here, so I apologize. If I could ask you just hold on 1 second.
Certainly.
We think perhaps we don't have the screen up here at the Sawyer Building, so if I could ask you just, again, if we could be at ease. Sorry about the technical difficulty, Deputy.
Absolutely.
Members, thank you for your patience. We'll come back to order and broadcasting. Thank you so much for helping us with get this to work and getting this to be simultaneous here at Sawyer Building, Carson City, and on the internet so that everybody can watch this presentation. And Deputy Secretary Woloshyn, thank you for your patience. Please proceed whenever you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Mark Woloshyn, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. Apologize for the brief technical interlude there, but we do have it up and running. So I will begin again with our live demonstration of the effective absentee system for elections. I do want to clarify a few administrative points before we jump into this demonstration. First and foremost, while there's plenty of technical details and security elements that we could discuss, we've addressed those in previous Legislative Operations and Elections Committees, so I will not go into those today, but I'm still, of course, available to discuss those if any member has a question about that. Today, we're going to specifically focus on what the program itself is, what it looks like, how it functions. I will call out two things. First and foremost, you'll notice that the website I have here, this one is the actual nves.gov. This is the site it goes to. This system is up and running now.
Deputy, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And again, no fault on your part. We just seem to be having some technical difficulties. So now I think I can see it. Now the website. For a minute I couldn't see it. So please continue. Now we can see it here at the Sawyer Building. Can you see it up in Carson City?
Yes, Chair, we can.
On the television screen, sir? You can?
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Woloshyn. Thank you. And hopefully it's visible on the internet for anyone watching online.
Perfect.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are two tabs open on this browser. This first one is when you type in nves.gov, this is the real live NVEs system. This has been turned on pursuant to the same timelines required by the Uniformed and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act for the distribution of mail ballots to those covered voters. This is the system we turn on no later than 45 days prior to any election. And now that it is an ADA compliance tool pursuant to Assembly Bill 121 in the 2021 legislative session, again, this tool, the EASE system, is turned on for every election across our state, including the most recent Palomino Valley General Improvement Board recall election that just concluded, I believe, this last Saturday. I am also calling out the fact that this is the live system here because I'm about to close it, specifically to highlight the fact that I am not going to give you a demonstration in the live environment. This is, again, a tool used for a real election that is ongoing currently, our primary election, and therefore I'm not going to be in that one. You'll notice when I close it that this browser now has the large test environment logo over it. Again, this is part of a system that is set up specifically for testing of modifications, enhancements based on everything from legislative mandates to user feedback to enhance it as before going into the production phase that we use for an election. This system, the EASE system, is allowed for use by, as I mentioned before, military and overseas citizens. So that's active duty military, their families, and overseas citizens. It's also allowed to be used by voters with a disability across Nevada, as well as tribal voters who live on a colony or reservation. And again, with the exception of some minor tweaks that I will highlight specifically in this test environment, this very much is the system that is in use, it's live and in production. So when you go to NVEs, one thing I do want to call out, well, actually, we'll get to that in a moment. First, it highlights who the eligible population of individuals are that can use the system. Again, we've intended it to be, one, ADA compliant, of course, across the board, and also to provide both bulletized and easily readable information about how the system works, as well as when it comes to the affidavits, ensuring that they're coming either right out of statute or regulation so that individuals understand how it works. Okay, so a voter will come to this site. Again, if they're a covered voter, they're absolutely able to use it. If they're not a covered voter, you'll see in a moment where they self-select out. It starts off as you move through the system, this workflow, asking if that individual is receiving assistance. Again, no different than is required on the outside of a ballot envelope if a voter requires assistance. If yes, it's simply a matter of providing that information into the system. So that it can be, again, provided to the county registrar or clerk as appropriate. If not, again, the voter simply indicates no and then continues to move forward. At this next step, this is the voter classifications. You'll notice that these are the different categories of covered voter eligible to use the system. And I'll try to zoom in a tiny bit to see if you can see that a little bit better. It starts off with active duty in the uniformed services or merchant marines. It talks about eligible spouse or dependent, U.S. citizens out of the country. And again, these categories about I intend to return, my intent to return is uncertain, mirror very closely the language on the federal postcard application. Again, we added, after the passage of the bill I mentioned previously in 2021, Nevada resident with a disability, and we have also added tribal member that resides on a colony or reservation. These subcategories are intended for a few reasons. First and foremost, for example, if the voter identifies as a tribal member, when they go to the Ohlone tribe leadership, has questions about who their tribal members are that have used the system, we're able to provide that specific by name roster to those tribal leaders so they can have that information. Similarly, again, when we talk about uniformed services, when a voter self-identifies, again, this simply identifies the list of categories or of the different branches and eligible organizations that can use the system to help inform some of our outreach. For example, if we notice that there's a consistent amount of individuals from across the branches of the service, but perhaps not in the U.S. Army, then we can identify that maybe we need to increase our outreach in that regard. There was also a legislative change that allowed the use of the Space Force, again, our nation's most new branch of the service, to also use this, so they are covered as well. But so moving forward through as part of this demonstration, and just to show you what it looks like, after an individual self-identifies down through, in some cases, either the branch of service or their other category, there is a specific affidavit about that voter's qualifications. Again, this is to be signed under penalty of perjury, so this is a very critical and important role and step in the process to ensure that only the eligible individuals are able to use the system. If somebody reads over the list and says, actually, none of these apply, and they click that box, none of these, it simply redirects them back to nvsos.gov. At this point, as they continue to move through and affirm under penalty of perjury that that they are a covered voter, next you move to the voter identification page. If you're a registered voter, as you input your information, it will pull up your information directly. For purposes today, I'm simply going to provide some test information. But otherwise, again, the intent here is, as you'll see, to either identify a previously existed voter or to provide the information needed for a clerk or registrar as appropriate. Also, again, I'll stress this is in the test environment. The CAPTCHA has been disabled, so I don't have to identify a fruit or vegetable. We'll move on past that. The system automatically identifies if you're not a registered voter. Again, this system does enable a voter to register for the first time and cast their ballot, as you'll see. If you are registered, it will identify that and pull your information, including your signature examples on file from the DMV. Moving forward, if you're a new voter, though, you'll see here kind of what essentially is the left column of information as the system asks your information to enable the clerk or registrar to register you. And I do want to be clear, while you're providing information in the e-system, when you click done at the end, that does not mean that you're registered. The clerk and registrar still have some steps that they must take in order to register that voter. Individuals identify their political party, as well as the method they wish to receive election information going forward. There's also an opportunity here, if you had in this box a signature that was on file and it recognized you as an existing registered voter, your signature would come up here. If you wanted to modify or replace or update your signature, so I'll get to that in a second, you have an opportunity to do that. The system wants my address first. So I'm going to put in the zip code first. You'll notice that when you put in a zip code, sorry, one. When you put in a zip code, it automatically populates the location based on that zip code, and even goes so far as to when you put in an address, it will automatically populate based on our street map index to identify, again, the intent here is to identify down to the precinct level. And this is an apartment complex in Las Vegas that I'm using today for this demonstration. You can also, again, keeping in mind this is intended for military and overseas voters, that if your residential address for that military overseas citizen is somewhere here in the state, but they happen to be living overseas or deployed or otherwise out of the state, and there's a different mailing address, that information can be provided here as well and to this right side. In regards to the signature, there's a couple different options for how to add your signature to the system. If you have a scan of your signature, as a number of folks do these days, you can simply scan over and upload that picture into this system. Or again, you can create a new one if that makes sense either. Or again, if you have a touchscreen even, you're able to update it via touchscreen to save and then update that signature for the clerk or registrar. It's a cursive E for those at home under the age of 20. Once the signature has been updated, you can save and continue. And again, it really just confirms that this is in fact the information that you provided. And again, just to remind everyone, this is the test environment. At this point, that information, again, is used to specifically identify the precinct where that voter lives. And again, across our state, there's a significant amount of work that the counties, the clerks, registrars, their staff members, our IT at the state, we work to make sure that every single ballot, whether it's a mail ballot that goes out to a voter's house, whether it's an ease ballot that a military or overseas or otherwise covered voter uses, or a ballot that an individual sees on an ICX screen standing in front of a Dominion or an ES&S system anywhere in our state, that there's uniformity across the board. I mention that because you'll see in red here at the top of the page, that in this case, there's even an opportunity for us to highlight if a qualification, or if a candidate has been disqualified by a court, as has in fact recently happened in one of our counties. In Pershing County, a candidate was disqualified, but because of the timelines affiliated with the development and distribution of mail ballots have gone out with that candidate's name still on them. So in Pershing County, if you log in and use the ease system, there will still be that same exact wording that you will see in person at a polling location, or that the Pershing clerk will be sending to her constituents to make sure that those voters understand that a vote cast for that candidate will not be counted. From this point, again, you can see it's the precinct-specific ballot. Again, in this case, it is the live ballot for this election. I will again stress it's the testing environment, so it will not. It's not a concern. But I do want also to highlight that we have set it up so that as much as possible, again, this mimics what you would see in any other method of voting across our state. Going so far as to even be HAVA compliant. The Help America Vote Act required systems to identify an overvote and an undervote. This actually prevents overvoting. You cannot overvote using this system. And I'll show you here in a moment that if you conduct an undervote, it flags that for you as well. So again, the idea is that voters will see this, and again, I don't want you to think when you hit review selections or end that it automatically tabulates somehow. I'll explain that part of the process as well. So voters will go through, they'll see their selections, they'll hit review. The system will flag undervotes to make sure that the voter sees that no vote has maybe been cast, perhaps deliberately, perhaps not. If the voter leaves it the exact same and hits confirm selections, then it moves to the next step. If they change something, it essentially redoes that review process. In this case, I will confirm the undervotes. As we close in on the final step in the process, voters have the ability to review the package that they're about to send, and there's a couple ways that they are able to return it to their county election official. The most secure one that we recommend is this Return Online Now that keeps it off the internet, does not put it into an email, and simply transmits it, the information through a secure method to our the county election officials, and I'll show you a hint of what that looks like on the back end. But the voters, again, if they prefer, would rather return it by mail, they can. They can print it out and fax or mail it in as well. You'll see it automatically populates the county election officials' information down here at the bottom. And then essentially at that point, the voters has submitted their package. So what does that packet actually look like? After they hit submit and that part of the process is done, this is a system that the county election officials have access to. This is part of our HAVA services. This is just a screenshot because, again, with the election going on, we do have live voter data, and I'm not, while it is elements of it public access and public information, in the interest of not causing any concerns, I just took screenshots to keep it a bit easier and cleaner. So an election official at the county level would go into this, go to My Reports, and then pull up the ease ballot submissions. And then it has only their county ease ballot submissions. And you'll see here in a moment, it actually looks kind of like this. What I did was I went to the 2022 general election. I left the status at any, but you'll see on the left column here, it's got the county name. If you're Clark, Washoe, or any of the counties that have a ease ballot submitted, you'll only see your counties. At the state, we can see all of them. It has the voter's ID and the voter's name, and again, that's critically important, a critically important step in the process, because if a voter attempts to vote twice, we stop it right here in its tracks. And we're able to identify that to prevent individuals from submitting multiple ballots. The submission date, also critically important, and I wanted to use the 22 general election to highlight the fact that this system is live up until the close of polls, no differently. And again, if you're voting from Azerbaijan or Japan or anywhere, again, that a covered voter could possibly be, as long as they hit submit prior to the close of polls, which is, again, by statute 7 p.m., but oftentimes, depending on there's a number of reasons the courts may direct it to be later, but in this case, it was 7 p.m. on November 8th of 22. This individual submitted the ballot a scant 5 minutes before the close of polls, and that was absolutely acceptable. Now, the download the ballot piece here, again, I'll also want to highlight this is the county-specific side of the process. When you click download ballot, I'll actually show you here in a minute, using the test one, again, what that looks like. Rest assured, at the state, we simply don't have access to this. If we click download ballot, there's a password that only the county clerks have. Again, an extremely important part of that process. And then the status, whether it's processed or whether maybe the voter voted in person before sending in an ease ballot out of nervousness or something. There's a process by which we can reject or otherwise not process those ballots. When they first come in, they pop up as new. So again, we have state staff that review this on a daily basis, and we'll gently remind the clerks, hey, I saw you have 5 ease ballots yesterday, and just to make sure that their staff are oriented on these. The processing timelines, again, as long as it's submitted prior to the close of polls, the processing timelines line up with other mail ballots. So they don't have to be processed before the close of the polls. They're typically processed within a day or two afterwards of arrival, really, to make sure that if there's a need for a signature cure or other information that the voters should have provided, the clerks and registrars have an opportunity to reach out to those individuals about it. Now, the packet itself, again, here is a test version, so I'm going to keep stressing that. The test, this is what that packet looks like. It starts off with the cover page, the transmission cover sheet. And again, you'll notice that it goes to specific email addresses at the counties, and this is the address and the information that I just put in this morning to save this. It's got the affidavit, the same information and the signature, along with the date stamp of when that individual hit submit. It's got information for the voter on how to return it, and then it comes down to one of two things. If it was a military or overseas voter, or somebody who's covered by the Uniform and Overseas Voting Absentee Voting Act, Uniform and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act, UOCAVA, then all the information that individual typed up gets mapped into a federal postcard application that you can see here, which is the application relating to UOCAVA and provides specific information. If the voter is not UOCAVA covered and self-identified as either a voter with a disability or a tribal voter who lives on a colony or reservation, instead of the federal postcard application, it's simply our state voter registration form. Again, an extremely important part, because when the county clerk or registrar clicks download, this is that packet that those individuals will be getting. And this is important to register them to vote. If they are already existing in the voter rolls, this is what gets compared to that to validate their eligibility. And then here below that, right, is what an ease ballot looks like. Again, the intent is that as close as possible, that it matches exactly what they would have seen otherwise. And this is also, again, a critical part in our tabulation process, because it does not, as I'd mentioned before, automatically go into tabulation. This packet that you can see here is a about 4 pages long. This is what would be printed out at the county level. They printed out this page here with the votes identified by that voter goes directly into the duplication process. So a bipartisan team of individuals would look at this ballot and say, well, in this case, they didn't vote for anybody, but assuming they had voted for somebody, the bipartisan team would look at that, find the precinct number, get the precinct ballot that it would be tabulatable, so to speak, and then duplicate that onto that tabulatable ballot with both individuals agreeing that, yes, this matches what that ease voter submitted, and then and only then would that ballot be submitted for tabulation. And again, that is after, of course, the voters registered. We're confirming that they haven't already cast a ballot in a number of other county-specific security processes to ensure the voters are eligible and that they, again, have not already voted twice. The last part I would like to highlight is that, again, at the state level, there's a number of reports of information that we can pull because of the way the e-system is set up. This is information, and again, I want to highlight very specifically that I have removed the first name, last name, and email of these voters, but this is information from our primary election. As of, I think this was yesterday evening when I saved this document, there were about 67 individuals who have submitted an ease ballot, and we're able to pull these reports, and I want to show you what they look like for your awareness. And again, very much with the exception of email, public information, and that's an important part of this also. Not only does it highlight when the ballot was complete, again, that's the date stamp that must be before the close of polls, but we can identify which counties have had individuals submit it. You can see the classification here, and so we're able to identify how many individuals were active service members or voters with a disability or spouses of active service members. If the individuals self-identify as being part of a tribal nation, we identify the tribe, and I do wish to report that unfortunately, as of last night anyway, we've not yet had a tribal voter use the system. So again, there's statistics we can gain from there. The return type, again, if an individual chooses to send it back via mail, as is their right, we identify that here also so that we're aware and can essentially keep an eye out for, at the county level, those ease ballots to be returned. But otherwise, if it's electronically transferred, we can track that. The date and time, we can also track whether, as I showed you, if it was new or processed. The county, talked about that. I've removed the voter ID number. The history, the code, some statistics about the users, browser, but then also comments. And I'm going to try to zoom in so that you can see these. And again, these are our live comments from voters who have voted during our current primary election. And this is information that, again, that we, there's members of the elections division that review this, on a daily basis, more or less, maybe every other day, depending on the workload, otherwise, to make sure that if someone says, I have a problem, then we reach out to that voter via their email to find out what it is and to address it. And likewise, if someone says there's, oftentimes we have questions about, well, how do I learn more about the individuals, the candidates, or is there another, some other sort of, a feature or question about the system. We use this feedback and consider it very seriously when we talk about enhancements and how to make the system even better in between election cycles. So that information overall, again, is not only a little bit about how the system works and how easy it is, and I think I will highlight lastly that you'll have noticed that from start to finish, you really could do the whole thing in 10, 15 minutes. Certainly, I remember back in 2020, Clark County had about a 3-page ballot. That might take you a little bit longer to work through, but again, that same exact process and system would be duplicated in the ease system, specifically, again, to ensure that voters have that opportunity to vote in the method of their choosing. Again, whether it's 2 weeks of in-person voting during early voting, 12 hours on election day, the ease system, or a mail ballot that would be sent to every active registered voter pursuant to our state laws. At this time, though, are there any questions for me relating to the ease system or the demonstration?
Deputy Secretary Woloshyn, thank you for the excellent presentation. Members, any questions? Vice Chair Mosca, and then I see Assemblywoman Dickman, and I'll ask up in Carson too. Vice Chair Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that great demo. My question is just, will this be changed at all or impacted by VREMS, or does it stay the same?
Thank you, Vice Chair, for the question. Mark Woloshyn for the record. No, ma'am. This system, again, is proprietary and standalone. It is independent from our transition to total vote across the state.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about where the area of the application that you talked about, where they check a box to certify that they're eligible to use the e-system. Is there anything that's done to confirm eligibility other than their statement that they are?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mark Voloshin, for the record. No, in regards to the voter's attestation under penalty of perjury, that suffices to identify eligibility. The state, frankly, the Secretary of State and the counties do not have the statutory authorities to question a voter or otherwise try to prevent somebody from using the system if they are claiming under penalty of perjury that they are in fact eligible. That being said, again, we stand ready that if somebody were to identify an individual that had used the system illegally, there are investigative processes that we would put in place to review that and get to the bottom of that if that were to happen. But as of yet, again, outside of one individual that I'm aware of that attempted to use the system, but again, ultimately was prevented from casting 2 ballots, it has not happened where an individual who is ineligible otherwise has used the system, at least to the best of my knowledge.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So,
Chief Secretary
basically
DeCaro.
anyone could sign up and do it that way, and no one would know better, correct?
Chief Tech, here at the Sawyer Building, we have Chief Deputy Secretary of State DeCaro.
Thank you, Chair. Gabriel DeCaro for the record. Assemblywoman, thank you for the question. As Deputy Voloshin said, the same as any other type of government form, if an individual indicates something under penalty of perjury that is not true, once that comes to the attention of the state, obviously we would work with the Attorney General's office on investigation and potential prosecution. I wanted to add that although there is no formal system in place, when the bill sponsored by Senator Orenshaw to allow members of Nevada tribes and bands who reside on reservations or colonies to utilize the EASE system, we have worked with for both voter registration and voting. We have reached out to tribes and worked out a verification system for if, for example, an individual uses a tribal ID to register to vote, which is perfectly permissible. We have a separate way of authenticating that with the tribe, the same as we use DMV records to authenticate voter registration via EASE for other voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. Any follow-up, Assemblywoman Dickman?
No, that's good. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief Deputy Secretary of State. Thank you, Deputy Secretary of State Voloshin, for the presentation. Senator Seaver-Scansard or Senator Daly, any questions for Deputy Secretary of State Voloshin? Senator, I'm not seeing any, but please pipe up if I'm missing you. A couple of questions I had. You mentioned undervote and overvote. Is it your experience, Deputy Secretary of State Voloshin, that there is less of both on the EASE system?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. To be perfectly frank, Chair, we have no possible way of knowing. Without, and I mean that specifically at the state level because we do not see the ballots. The secrecy of the ballot is something that we take very seriously. We do not ask when the counties duplicate the ballot onto the tabulatable ballot that they maybe take notes on overvotes or undervotes. So that is not something that we track, record, or otherwise pay any attention to through this system.
Thank you. Additional question I had is, can the voter who uses the EASE system track to make sure that their ballot was counted?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. Yes, voters can track that as well. From the time it is submitted, the voter will receive an email notification that they've submitted a ballot through this process. When the clerk has gone through, validated, and put it into the same steps in the process for whether it's once it's been tabulated, the vote history code will populate as well. If a voter prints it out and mails it back in, unfortunately, that will not be tracked. because that will be on essentially a personal envelope and not one that is tracked through our tracking system. But when it comes to the electronic submission and as it gets processed at the county level, there are some elements of data that the voter will have access to ensure that they are aware their vote has been tabulated.
Thank you very much. And then my last question, and I guess I'm going a little bit off on a tangent here, but when you just demonstrated how someone would vote and that they could only pick one candidate on their choice, if the voters at this election approve ranked choice voting, will EASE be able to handle that, or will it need to be reprogrammed or a new software package if people would select more than one candidate in the future?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Voloshin for the record. Excellent question. I will say also, the system is currently set up so that there are certain elections and certain races that may be a pick 2 of 3 or pick 2 of 5. Those already are possible. If question 3 on the general election ballot is passed in a vote by the voters, there would be additional work that would be required in this system in order to have it set up to meet the same standards and to conduct the same ranked choice voting process based on the statutes the legislature decides during the 25 session. Thankfully, though, as a proprietary system, again, this is a system that our staff, the Secretary of State's IT team developed and maintains, along with work from the others in the agency. So it wouldn't require a new contract. It would not require new modules. That would be a routine part of our staff work to ensure the system meets statutory requirements.
Thank you. Chief Deputy Secretary of State DeCara.
Gabriel DeCara for the record. I just wanted to add to that, Senator Orenshaw, that while Deputy Voloshin is absolutely correct, the EASE system, as it's developed in-house and as there are some similarities already in place, we feel comfortable about our ability to make those changes. There are numerous other IT systems and processes that would have to be updated if question 3 were to pass. That would take a significant amount of resources for the state and the counties to make those changes to their software. And should question 3 pass, the members of this committee will be having a number of conversations about what that looks like next legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Deputy Secretary of State. Thank you, Secretary Voloshin. Members, any additional questions? No. Well, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. It was so wonderful to get to see how it works through that presentation. And thank you to broadcasting and our staff here for making that happen. With that, now I'd like to go to the last item on our agenda, item 9, our second period of public comment. Again, public testimony under this item may be presented in person or by phone or under written comment. Because of time considerations, each person offering testimony during this period for public comment will be limited to not more than 2 minutes. A person may also have comments added to the minutes of the meeting by submitting them in writing either in addition to testifying or in lieu of testifying. Written comments may be submitted by email to the email address LOE-interim, INTERIM, at lcb.state.nv.us. And the L, the O, the E, and the I are in all caps. Everything else is in small caps. LOE-interim at lcb.state.nv.us. You can fax written comments to the following phone number, 775-684-680. 684-6400, 775-684-6400, or you can mail written comments the old-fashioned way via snail mail to the LCB Research Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701-4747, before, during, or after the meeting. If anyone would like to dial in on the phone to provide telephonic testimony during this period of public comment, we again announce the phone number is 888-475-4499. Again, that's 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, please enter the following meeting ID: 817-4633-4927, and then press the pound key. Again, that meeting ID is 817-4633-4927, and then press the pound key. When prompted for a participant ID, just press the pound key again. If you're having any problems providing public comment, you can call the following phone number. That's 775-684-6990. Again, that's 775-684-6990. With that, I'd like to go to broadcasting and see if there's anyone on the, actually before I go to broadcasting, Sawyer Building, I don't see anybody coming up for public comment. Up in Carson City, is there anyone who wishes to make public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone in Carson City. So broadcasting, if we can now go to the phone lines and see if there's anyone who wishes to make public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If you are joining us telephonically and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to join the queue.
Good afternoon, Oscar Williams. I have a question for Mr. Voloshin and then some general comment. Mr. Voloshin, hello. Nice presentation, sir. My question is, do you have statistics on the number of self-printed and mailed ballots?
And Mr. Williams, public comment is an opportunity for the public to make public comment. It's not an opportunity to ask questions, but please go ahead and finish your public comment.
Okay, very well. I apologize. A previous speaker, I forgot who it was, they mentioned that voter preference was for mail ballots. I see it a little differently. I see it as a voter preference for paper ballots. People don't trust the machines, and so their best option is a paper ballot. And so that's why you're seeing so many mail ballots, along with limits to polling locations. Nevada has consistently and unabatedly offered a paper ballot since statehood in 1864. Paper ballots are a right. In 2020, voters ratified the Voters' Bill of Rights, and that was enacted by the legislature under NRS 293-2546. Clause number 10 is the uniform statewide standard for counting and recounting all votes accurately. When that became ratified and enacted, it basically made the DRE voting system illegal because it's not a paper ballot system. The elements of the VVPAT and the BND, where the voter trail, as it's called, something that would eventually be used for an audit, but even in terms of the BND just being counted as a ballot, it relies on a QR code. Well, the QR code is not readable by humans. In fact, in Georgia, in the case of Curling versus Raffensperger, there were some questions as to the integrity of the QR codes, and there's a proposal, I believe, before the state legislature there to change the QR to a barcode. Apparently, the barcode is more trustworthy, something for Nevada to consider. And in regards to, and the QR code, in terms of audit, it violates NRS 293-2696 at 4, required to have a manual audit capacity. Again, you can't read the QR code. You don't know that is accurate representation of the votes cast. And in regards to a BMD system, my preferred method of a BMD is a ballpoint pen. Ballpoint pens cost pennies. There's no setup, no patches or updates. It's a simple way to go. If the power goes down, I still got my ballpoint pen. That's all I have to add. Thank you for your time, and thank you for this wonderful meeting today.
My name is Ellen Gifford. Thank you for the opportunity to give public comment. The Secretary of State's office provided a memorandum of guidance to Nevada County clerks and registrars for the implementation of SB 406. In that guidance, they used an election observer as an example of someone who would perform one of the felonious acts described in SB 406. What kind of an impression of election observers must that conjure up in the minds of the county clerks and registrars who received that memorandum? What kind of welcome and support will election observers receive when they arrive to observe after being used in a derogatory example like that? Being respectful is everyone's responsibility. There are numerous federal and state laws that mandate it is the public's right to observe their election processes. Election observers are the public. They are voters, and voters are not to be intimidated. There's a law that says that as well. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. And Chief Deputy Secretary of State DeCara, do you wish to make public comment? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Orenshaw. Gabriel DeCara for the record. I just wanted to put on the record for anyone who may be seeing or attending this meeting that part of SB 406, the Election Worker Protection Bill that was passed unanimously and signed by the governor, includes specific protections for election observers as long as you are not committing criminal harassment or threatening an election worker or observer at their either place of work or their home. There is no threat of prosecution. This is strictly regarding criminal acts against election workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing that out. And again, Senate Bill 406 I was just looking up, passed unanimously, was signed into law by the governor, and I do see that many states are following the lead of our Secretary of State here in terms of laws to try to make sure that voters and election workers are all, that there are no threats of intimidation, either during early voting election day, collecting mail ballots. Broadcasting, if there's no other public comment, we will be having our final meeting in August. There will be agenda items to be posted on a future agenda. We will also discuss potential bill draft requests for the upcoming session on our committee webpage. We will be posting a letter with an invitation for solicitation of ideas. So that will be coming forward. And then our next meeting is in August. So unless there's any other comment from members, I appreciate everyone's help. Our staff's great, tremendous effort broadcasting, making this presentation happen. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.